Good morning. I'd like to call to order the May 13, 2014 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this time, I'd like to invite Deputy Teddy Floyd from the Indian River County Sheriff's Department to lead us in the invocation, and then I will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance following that. Would everyone rise? Teddy, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you. We thank you for this great country. We thank you for our commission. Thank you for our bosses. Thank you for my boss, the sheriff. I ask that you protect our families, our neighborhoods, and our children, God. And when it's over, we'll give you the praise. Let us say amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joe. Thank you. Under additions or deletions to the agenda, we have a request from Commissioner Slory to add an item 14D2, and then a presentation scheduled under public speaking 10B1 has been asked to reschedule that to the May 20th meeting. Is there any other changes or additions to the agenda?
Move as amended. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. That takes us to proclamations and presentations. And first, we have quite a crowd here for this one. The presentation of a proclamation honoring Marge Gruber on her retirement from the Indian River County Supervisor of Elections Office. This will be presented by Commissioner Davis. Marge, why don't you come up and
bring your crew.
And bring everybody with you, Marge. Come on up. Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to read this one. I appreciate that. I can say I go about probably, Marge, I might not remember it at the time, but with you starting in 1988, that was when I turned 18, and that's when I was able to go down and get registered to vote.
You're making
so
me feel
it was a pleasant experience. Yes, it was a pleasant experience. So, and you know, it's I don't know, it's unique whenever you have the opportunity to come in and pull paperwork, run for an office under several different supervisor elections, and you start off with when you have a child that can't walk, and now he's 21 years old, and you've been there a long time, and it's certainly been a great experience. So I'm very humbled to read this to you and with you. This is a proclamation honoring Marge Gruber on her retirement from the Indian River County Supervisor of Elections Office. Whereas Marge Gruber is retiring from Indian River County effective May 30th, 2014. And whereas Marge began her career in banking in Texas and moved to Indian River County in 1987 to work for Barnett Bank. In 1988, Marge commenced work at the Supervisor of Elections Office. And whereas Marge served under 3 Supervisor of Elections, Ann Robinson, Kay Clem, and current Supervisor Leslie Swan. And whereas Marge served as an election specialist and the absentee ballot coordinator during her 26 years at the elections office. And whereas Marge witnessed many voting equipment changes during her time with the elections office as voting methods evolved from punch cards to touch screens to the current optical scan paper ballots. And whereas Marge also experienced noticeable growth in office space, beginning with cramped headquarters in the county administration building, the old hospital, to the 13 modular buildings assembled in the county parking lot to the current complex located at 43rd Avenue. Isn't that the truth? Marge began as a valued employee, earned respect from voters, co-workers, candidates, commissioners, and judges for her dedication and hard work conducting elections and facilitating the voting process. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that the board applauds Marge Gruber for her loyalty and dedication to the county, and the board extends their heartfelt wishes for success in her future endeavors and happy and prosperous retirement. Adopted this 13th day of May 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Congratulations. Let's hear a few words, Marge.
Thank you, Wesley, and thank you, all county commissioners, and Joe. I've had the opportunity of working with most of you during election time, and I'm very grateful to have spent the last 26 years working for the election office, and I'm very grateful that you took a few minutes out of your busy day, to present the speech the way you did. I'm looking very much forward to retirement. It's kind of going to be like a starting of a new chapter in my life. It's a very exciting moment, but at the same time, it's going to be kind of a sad thing too, but I'm not going to cry. As you can see, I have my wonderful current boss, Leslie Swan, with me, my lovable husband, Scott, and most of my co-workers, and which I'm going to miss. I've been with them so long, they're kind of like part of my family.
Absolutely.
During the 26 years, not only my co-workers, like I say, I've met you, the judges, Daryl over here, a lot of great county employees, and I'll miss everybody. I'm sure we'll cross paths. Vero's still not that big, but I just want to thank you and say I'll miss everybody.
Oh, super.
And I just simply wanted to say that, Marge, it's been an incredible career, 26 years. She's seen the voter rolls more than double since she started working at our office. She's worked for 3 different supervisors of elections, 3 different locations, and 3 different voting systems. And she was part of the infamous 2000 presidential recount. So she's seen a lot go on, and if Walls could talk, I'm sure she'd have a lot of good stories. So, Marge, you've left an indelible mark at the elections office, and we'll miss your professional expertise and your friendship, and we wish you the best of luck.
Leslie, I guess now that she's retired, she didn't get the memo about the blue and white stripes.
I didn't get the memo. I'm the only one with polka dots.
But I'd just also like to say, I think one thing every citizen in River County should do is spend at least one election being a poll worker, and to see how hard you all work to make an election come off. And it's just having been involved on the canvassing board and seeing how hard you all work. I mean, I think people just take it for granted what goes into pulling off an election. And so all of you, but Marge, this is your day, but all of you to be commended for the work you do so that we can have these elections here, and know that, I have full faith and confidence that those election results are accurate, that the staff has done everything possible to make sure that the process works the way it is. And so all of you, but especially today, Marge, for you, just congratulations on all you all do and all of your hard work. So thank you.
Thank you.
You did, especially with getting those 941 petitions counted for you. We're happy with that.
Do you have the volunteer call-in number for the 2014 election?
Yeah.
Leslie, I think you just gained a volunteer.
Because they say I won't get bored, but I'm not sure yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hey, Marge, why don't you come on up here? We'll get a picture with you up here with us. Because yours is special.
$30 petition. That's way up here.
Come on.
You okay?
I'm still standing up.
Hang on. They can't read it from there.
Recouping.
Difference in the camera doesn't ring.
Yes.
1 second.
Leslie, y'all need to order some new batteries.
This time not Russell.
Thank you. Thank you for everything. Okay. Next is a presentation of a proclamation designating May 16, 2014 as Indian River County's Bike to Work Day. This will be presented by Commissioner Zork. And do we have Sharon LaPointe here? Oh, good. Come on up. Welcome. Good morning.
Larry.
Hirschbarger.
Very good. Commissioner Zork.
Good morning. I'll read the proclamation. If you'd like to make a brief statement afterwards, that'd be wonderful. A proclamation designating May 16, 2014 as Indian River County's Bike to Work Day. Whereas since the mid-1800s, bicycles featured in play, sport, and transportation lives of Americans across all regions and demographic groups, and whereas most Indian River County citizens and visitors bicycle for practical mobility, physical fitness, and family recreation throughout the year. And whereas educating both cyclists and motorists about the correct, safe operation of bicycles and cars is crucial for everyone's safety and comfort. And whereas the Indian River County Metropolitan Planning Organization Bicycle Advisory Committee, cycling organizations, and independent cyclists throughout Indian River County and the state of Florida are promoting greater public awareness of bicycle operation and safety education in an effort to reduce accidents, injuries, and fatalities. And whereas May is National Bike Month and May 16th is National Bike to Work Day, now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners, Indian River County, Florida, that the Board does hereby designate May 16, 2014 as Bike to Work Day in Indian River County, adopted this 13th day of May, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you. We appreciate you recognizing Bike to Work Day. This is our first Indian River County Bike to Work Day, and we're excited. We'd love you all to join us, everybody. We're starting bright and early Friday morning at 5:15 over at South Beach, and then we will ride to Einstein Bagels, and then from there to Panera, and then people can ride on to their work. We also allow people to join whenever they like. It's a slow-paced ride. It's not anything strenuous, but it does provide an opportunity for people to get together. We are a growing number nationally, and we are a growing number in Indian River County. If you've been up and down A1A on a Sunday, you have seen sometimes 100 different people cycling. So we welcome you all to join us, and we're very excited about this first Bike to Work Day for Indian River County.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Come on, you got to go through the gauntlet. Very good. Thank you very much.
Do you have anybody to take a picture with you?
No.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next is a proclamation recognizing May 11th through May 17, 2014 as National Police Week, and I'll be presenting this. Sheriff, if you'd like to come up, and then I know we have Chief Curry, Chief Touchberry, Chief Morris, and then all the other officers. Why don't you all come on up and stand at the respective podiums, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is always a difficult one to read and present. The sheriff conducted the candlelight vigil last night, and one of the points of the ceremony, but the sad point of it is, Chief Touchberry read off the names of the officers in Florida that made the ultimate sacrifice in 2013. Unfortunately, I guess that number was 4, and I guess fortunately that number was only 4. In addition, 2 K-9 units also gave their life serving the community. So this, I'll go ahead and present this, recognizing May 11th through May 17, 2014 as National Police Week. Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and Indian River County Municipal Police Departments. Whereas in 1962, President John F. Kennedy signed a proclamation which designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which that date falls as Police Week. And whereas, on average, 1 law enforcement officer is killed in the line of duty somewhere in the United States every 57 hours. Since the first known line of duty death in 1791, more than 19,000 U.S. law enforcement officers have made the ultimate sacrifice. And whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas nearly 60,000 assaults against law enforcement officers are reported each year, resulting in approximately 16,000 injuries. And whereas new names of fallen heroes are being added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial this spring. In 2013, the names of 321 officers who died in the line of duty during the previous calendar year, as well as officers who were killed earlier in history but whose line of duty sacrifices only recently came to light, are being added to the memorial. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 25th Annual Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13, 2014. And whereas the Candlelight Vigil is part of National Police Week, which takes place this year on May 11 through May 17. And whereas May 15 is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and the United States flag should be flown at half-staff. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that May 11 through 17, 2014 is recognized as National Police Week in honor of the service of the law enforcement officers in our community and communities across the nation. Adopted this 13th day of May, 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Sheriff?
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you. And on behalf of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and our events last night, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Fletcher, for being there. Today, we're honored. We have Captain Rowe from the Florida Game and Fish that hasn't been with us before. We have newly appointed Police Chief Chief Touchberry with us for our first time here, and an old friend of law enforcement, Chief Redstone from Orchid Island, has had an opportunity to meet. He recently retired from another job, so now he can come to meetings with us. But I will tell you, gentlemen, on a serious note, we have over 75,000 law enforcement officers in the state of Florida, and combined with state, local, and law enforcement and federal officers in this county, to include our corrections deputies, we have about 500 total law enforcement officers in this county. I feel very, very comfortable that we are well positioned to handle any crisis. We had a large event this weekend that went off flawlessly, and that's a reminder of what we do behind the scenes. It's my honor to receive this proclamation. We also have Ms. Shirley Roseman, who coordinated the event last night. She has a few words, and then hopefully the chiefs will say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Shirley Roseman. I'm the Victim Assistance Coordinator at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. And first of all, I would just like to say thank you so much for having us every year to receive this proclamation. It means a lot. I would like to say thank you to the multi-agency committee each and every one of you. We've met several times since about February or March to try to organize this event, the wreath placement ceremony. And, we just all kind of brainstormed to try to make it better and better each year. This year we made a drastic change. In previous years we've had it at 10 o'clock a.m. in the morning. But we came up with the idea to change it to 5:30 in the evening because we wanted to get more of the public involved. We feel like we're always preaching to the choir. We're looking around at law enforcement officers, but we wanted to get the public involved. If the public gets off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5:30 they have a chance to arrive at the courthouse. So we're so thankful for that. And we just appreciate what law enforcement does. I'm not just speaking from the point of being on the committee. I'm speaking from the point also of being a spouse of a law enforcement officer. So this is just not work to me. I live this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning. It's certainly an honor to be a representative of the Vero Beach Police Department, and thanks for having us this morning. I just want to thank you for, again, acknowledging the fallen officers nationwide and even locally. And we have to also remember the officers that are out there as we speak, protecting us day in and day out as well. So thanks again.
Thank you. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, and thank you again for your support of the City of Sebastian, our police department, and the community, and especially our law enforcement officers.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm new to this position over Indian River County, and I'm just impressed by the support of the commissioners and this county for National Police Week, and honored to be a part of it, and looking forward to working in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, Chief.
Good morning, and thank you, commissioners, again for this recognition. After spending 24 years working for the Vero Beach Police Department and knowing how quickly your backup was in an adjacent zone, you were comforted that you had that support so close. Having been out in Felsmer now for about 7 or 8 months, it's not quite that way. And the officer's closest backup on many occasions is the county's 105 unit, who may or may not be busy. So it takes a little different attitude to police when your backup is not so close. So for those officers, I thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Mike Jacobs. I'm the acting director with Indian River Shores Public Safety Department. And on behalf of the town of Indian River Shores, thank you for the proclamation. Thank you for this recognition. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners from the smallest police department in the county. Appreciate the proclamation this morning. Started my law enforcement career in 1971 in Indian River County. And I can say that we are blessed in this community to have 5 police agencies, sheriff's office, and state agencies that work so well together to protect their community. Thank you so much for the proclamation about the fallen officers and also honoring the officers that are out there protecting our community today. Thank you very much.
Thank all of you all very much for the work you do.
Good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you? Good to see you again. Good morning. Thanks for joining. Welcome. Reach this way.
So Kevin, where do you live?
Yeah, some departments get envious and they just want to keep up with the other agencies.
Hey, sure.
He's probably not done yet either.
You probably heard of this guy.
Yeah. But Joe, I'm sure this year he's actually going to have it in his budget. Joe, we're going to have to give him our dictionary, which has a little different
definition of minor?
Minor infractions. Again, she's a tail light.
We want to do the same thing every year about being one or two short. Maybe a little remedial driving one. I'm just trying to warm up on the budget. Yeah. Yep, every year. It happened with Gary and me.
Next, we have a presentation of a proclamation recognizing May 12th through 16th, 2014 as Small Business Week. This will be presented by Commissioner Solari, and receiving this is Penny Chandler and Helene Castletine with the Vero Beach Indian River County Chamber. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Commissioner Solari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm very happy to read this proclamation about small businesses. As most of us know, small businesses are basically the engine for job growth in America. And this commission, I'm happy to say, has been very friendly towards business development and small businesses. So we certainly appreciate all your work, and just want to make sure anybody listening out in the audience knows that we love small business and we want you here. So I'm happy to read this proclamation recognizing May 12th through 16th, 2014 as Small Business Week. Whereas each year since 1963, Small Business Week has been recognized for the contributions of America's small business owners. And whereas more than one-half of Americans either own or work for a small business. And whereas small business creates 2 of every 3 jobs in the United States. And whereas small businesses in Indian River County account for a majority of local jobs. And whereas 97% of the nearly 7,500 businesses in Indian River County account for a majority of the local jobs. And whereas small businesses have for years been the backbone of Indian River County's economy. And whereas small businesses are again beginning to thrive and hire new employees. And whereas Indian River County embraces and supports our small business entrepreneurs. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board recognizes the contributions of our local small businesses and joins other counties in the United States in naming May 12th through 16th, 2014 as Small Business Week, adopted this 13th day of May 2014 and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Our chamber, along with many, many other organizations in the United States, recognize the contributions of small businesses. With us, Helene and I, are Billy Chavers and Jeff Schlitt. Both of them serve on our board of directors and represent small businesses. In Indian River County, as you pointed out, 97% of the businesses are, as defined by the state of Florida, 50 employees or less are small businesses. And 68% of our businesses here locally have fewer than 5 employees. We're pleased that we have the partnership that we do, the business community and the commission, in promoting our business community and being able to welcome new businesses to Indian River County. So thank you very much. We appreciate your recognition today.
Just to highlight what's going on, we just approved a job grant contract a couple of weeks ago for a small business, a company just starting up, roughly about 21 total employees, but they're all, well-paying jobs, and that's just the kind of small businesses we love to welcome here in Indian River County. So
absolutely, and when you add those number of small businesses that we're able to bring in over time, it adds up to hundreds of new jobs.
Good. Thank you.
Good to see you. How are you? Good to see you. How are you? Thanks for coming this morning.
Thank you for coming down this morning.
Helene, good morning.
Thank you for all your help. We're going to take a picture with do our picture taking moment.
Come on, this way.
Wait.
Not quite.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Next is approval of the regular meeting minutes of April 8, 2014. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Davis, second by Commissioner Flesher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 5-0. There is one informational item, just to mention. Kenneth Ellis of the Department of General Services Recreation Division is retiring after 12 years of service to the county. So, Kenneth, we wish you good luck and best wishes in your future endeavors. That then takes us to the consent agenda. Gentlemen, anything you wish to pull?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Flesher. Is there anyone in the audience that would wish to have a consent agenda item pulled for additional discussion? Anyone from the audience wishes a consent agenda item pulled? Okay, seeing none. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously as well. Constitutional officers and governmental agencies. A is Darrell Lohr, Indian River County Sheriff. Application for fiscal year 2014 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Formula Program.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Slaughter. Sheriff, is there anything you'd like to speak to?
Just briefly, thank you. We always love the no-match grants, and this is going to go a long ways. Commissioner Flesher knows a lot about this. He spoke about it a few years ago very intimately, and I appreciate that. But Commissioners, before me today, I want to introduce one of our young stars at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. Part of our succession plan, Ms. Amber Greer is now our grants coordinator. Ms. Greer started in dispatch and public safety 9 years ago. She advanced to our IT department, our computer department. She's a computer whiz. She has her bachelor's degree, and now she is our grants and planning department. She's going to be a star for many years for the residents of this county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good. We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Slaughter. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 5-0. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Moving on to public items. The first is a public hearing. Consideration of a county-initiated land development regulation amendment to create Section 911.29 special overlay regulations for the West Gifford Industrial and Commerce Area on 163 acres of property in West Gifford Zone IG, which is General Industrial. This memorandum is dated May 5th, 2014. It is legislative in nature. And with that, we'll turn this over to Community Development Director, Mr. Stan Boying. Good morning, Stan. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that this item has already been before the board in large part back on February 18th, and there was a lot of discussion at that time. A lot of the information is similar, but I do want to give some background to make sure that everybody in the audience is up to speed on the work that's been done. This is the first of 2 hearings for the board to consider adopting some overlay regulations in what we're calling the West Gifford Industrial and Commerce Area. This is an aerial of that particular area. To the right-hand side is 43rd Avenue. To the left-hand side is 58th Avenue. So this property that's under discussion now, and the regulations that would go apply in this property, is in the area that's on the north side of 41st Street, west of 43rd Avenue, east of 58th Avenue, and most of it is south of 45th Street, although there is some property that's a little bit to the north side of 45th Street. And that 163 acres that the proposed regulations would apply to, the West Gifford Industrial and Commerce Area, is outlined in the purple and black dotted area here. And you can see from this aerial that there are already a number of uses within that area, some junkyards, various industrial uses, industrial park, a subdivision, but there's also about 70 of the 163 acres are vacant or nearly vacant, so there's quite a bit of development potential for industrial. There's also a number of residential subdivisions that are platted. They're shown in its colored areas, and if you back up from this particular map, you can see the darker purple area is that 163 acres zoned IG, general industrial. The light kind of purple color is light industrial. heavy commercial is in the red in this area. And then all these different types of other zoning districts around that area are various types of residential, single family, some multifamily. And then the gray to the south here is the City of Vero Beach municipal area. Most of that is the airport property itself. So you have a number of industrial uses and future uses in an area that's also, in a lot of ways, surrounded by residential uses. That's why this effort was initiated. And just real quickly, some of the highlights. In 2009, there was a site plan approved for Ocean Concrete plant in this particular area. And when residents became aware, they approached the county and asked for the whole area to be downzoned to IL, from IG to IL. We came before the board. The board authorized staff to work with representatives and come back, not really looking at the downzoning as an option, but looking for other alternatives. Since the fall of 2009, the staff has developed an email contact procedure that's been in effect, and from staff's perspective has been effective in notifying interested parties and community leaders in Gifford of proposed projects that are coming up for review by the county staff and by county P&Z and the board. In 2010, staff met with Gifford representatives and came back to the board with a proposal to rezone the 163 acres to a new district specific to Gifford, with some uses that are in IG now eliminated, some uses not allowed now added, and then some special regulations. And then we conducted some property owners' workshops. And in 2010 and 2011, besides workshops, there was a tour of a concrete plant, Prestige concrete plant in O'Galley. That was eye-opening and ear-opening, and with respect to impacts, potential impacts that concrete plants can have. In 2012, staff conducted a second property owners workshop, the affected property owners, and the meeting was not productive. And Bill DeBrawl did a good job of stepping forward and volunteering to do mediation with individuals and small groups on all sides of the issue. And that mediation effort was conducted over about a 1.5-year period. And we also got input with the Gifford Neighborhood Plan Update community meetings from the community. Some observations that staff had during the process was that any new development that does happen in Gifford will meet new requirements, and from an aesthetic standpoint will look a lot better than a lot of the projects that were developed in decades past. There's been an agreement all the way through the process that a cleanly run business and industry is a good thing. Residents support that, community leaders support that, and of course property owners as well. Residents have expressed a lot of concerns based on past experiences. There have been some environmental and land use conflicts in Gifford, and those are real experiences, and that's some of the background of the concerns that residents have. Also concerns from property owners about regulations and looking to compromise or not compromise. Where will the regulations end? What can be really certain? That's what we're trying to bring about through this process. Some of the results of mediation, certainly there are uses that can be eliminated that's not really objected to. Uses can be added to help property owners have more uses that will be compatible with industrial as well as residential that's around them. The property owners want to retain the IG zoning, and that is what's being proposed now. And residents want effective regulations, and that's why the overlay regulations are being proposed. Also, with the mediation results, 3 uses we were focused on as being contentious: how to regulate or whether or not to allow concrete batch plants, demolition debris sites, and mulch operations. And it was concluded that specially regulating those 3 uses might be a compromise and a way forward. At your meeting on February 18th, you considered draft overlay regulations very similar to what's before you this morning, and I'll go over the differences in just a moment. There was a 3-hour input and discussion. Everyone was allowed to speak. It was conducted like a public hearing. The board supported the overlay concept to retain the IG zoning and to eliminate and add certain uses. Concrete batch plants and demolition debris being treated as special exception uses. I think there is a consensus on that as well. I will point out that demolition debris is currently special exception in IG, but what's proposed is to add more stringent criteria. Mulch facilities, I think there were fewer concerns about that type of use. We have an existing mulch facility in the area, and there seems to be a desire to possibly expand that. But again, concerns really focused on fire protection as much as anything with the mulch facilities. There are concerns about the cost of a 45th Street upgrade requirement. We have some information in your backup and to present to you this morning on that issue. And there was a 4-to-1 vote from the board, the one to move forward, and that's why we're here before you all this morning with the first of 2 public hearings. The dissenting vote was really in support of regulations, but would like to express a concern to go ahead and prohibit batch plants and demolition debris. But there was support for moving forward. The proposed overlay regulations, again, would apply to the 163 acres that I outlined at the beginning of my presentation. Those properties would remain IG zoned, and that's appropriate because most of the uses in IG zoning would remain with these overlay regulations. But these regulations would modify the list of allowed uses, and that's why we're actually having 2 public hearings in this process. 15 uses would be eliminated with the proposed overlay. None of those that are to be or would be eliminated currently exist, and in staff's opinion, they're unlikely to be developed. Examples: adult entertainment, airstrips, airports, landfills, manufacturing plants for tobacco, paper, tires, petroleum, steel, cement. Those are types of uses that would be prohibited. There's a chart in your backup of every one of the uses that's proposed to be eliminated. 39 uses are proposed to be added. Examples of those: auto repair and sales, carpet and dry cleaning, equipment rental, repair services, indoor, inside of buildings, salvage facilities, paint and hardware stores. And these are types of uses that would be compatible with the other industrial uses that would remain in the proposed overlay regulations. There are, again, some choices that were discussed at your February meeting on how to treat concrete batch plants, demolition debris, and mulch facilities. The choices being a permitted use, administrative permanent use, special exception, or prohibited. With the proposal that's before you all this morning, special exception is proposed for concrete batch plants and demolition debris facilities. It provides an opportunity for a property owner to meet stringent criteria and make a case for and to demonstrate compatibility. There's notice and input. There's Planning and Zoning Commission review at a public hearing, and a public hearing before you all and the board would get to make the final decision. There are criteria and really, again, higher review standards for any application that might come in for either of those 2 uses. Now, there are some of the criteria that are proposed for demolition debris and concrete batch plant: a 300-foot separation between various uses on such a site, such as outdoor stockpiling, loading, unloading, and processing from the closest residential dwelling or zoning, dust and noise controls, use of structural enclosures, again, if an application comes in. There's also a list of best management practices that staff has developed. And best management practices generally are guidelines, but the way that this ordinance is structured, any one or all of those guidelines could be made requirements and could be attached as a condition to any application, and that would be reviewed essentially on a project-by-project basis. Now, for mulch facilities, one change from what you saw in February is that the proposal now is to have any new mulch facility or a mulch facility expansion, rather than a special exception, to be an administrative permit. And that would go through staff review and Planning and Zoning Commission review. Again, the email contact list that we used for Gifford residents and interested parties would be used in that process. There's a requirement for 300-foot separation from residential and a Type A buffer if any such facility were to abut residential. That's not the case with the existing facility or where we think the current facility would be expanded, but it is there as a protection. Dust control and fire prevention planning are the main components, and what we did in this particular case was go ahead and specify from that best management practice list exactly which practices would apply. So that whole list is not opened up for a mulch facility. We targeted what would apply. Also, part of the overlay regulations involve a requirement for an aesthetic upgrade for junkyards that front 45th Street. There's a few reasons for that recommendation and the proposed regulation. One is that 45th Street is Gifford's main street. certainly east of 43rd Avenue, the more developed area, but also in this area between 43rd Avenue and 58th Avenue. And so it's important. The appearance of 45th Street is important. The upgrade that you would normally get with redevelopment is unlikely to happen with many of these junkyards because they're already developed, and we wouldn't have normal redevelopment triggers unless they came in for a full sort of renovation. And also just wanted to point out, as far as 45th Street goes, east of 43rd Avenue, the county has a beautification project not only funded, but also is going to be part of the Gifford Neighborhood Plan initiative that's moving forward. Did want to point out just some examples, and you saw the next two, this slide and the next slide in February. Just an example, looking at from the south side of 45th Street. Again, we're west of 43rd Avenue, looking north at some existing junkyards, and just the need for an aesthetic upgrade. And there are two options in the proposed regulations. One is for some landscaping in front of existing fencing. An 8-foot fence is was required at the time that these were approved. And with this particular one that has the blue material and fencing, that's the Gaddis Capitol site. They do have an application in for a building permit and a site plan to put in an aesthetic wall along most of the frontage here. Part of it would remain a fence but have landscaping in front of it. So that's some good news that's in the works. Mr. Scrapp on the south side of 45th Street put in a decorative wall just a few years back, and you can see just aesthetically that appearance is really nice, and Mr. Tague was commended by the community for taking that step. Also provided a lot of kind of security and permanency and just a good look for the business itself. There are 7 junkyard sites that front 45th Street with a variety of frontages. Mr. Scrapp actually is already complying with the proposed regulations with the wall that was put in. They had the most frontage, 342 feet. Gaddis Capitol, where the wall and the landscaping have been applied for, it has 210 feet. There's another business that has 250 feet of frontage, and actually a wall has been discussed with that. Property owners indicated some interest in doing that. And then there are 4 other sites ranging in 145 feet to 165 feet of frontage. They're shown on this particular aerial from January 2014. Right at the very edge here to the left is one of the grandfathered in junkyards. Another one here just to the east of that. They are spread out a little bit, pointing out this one, PTNF, Mr. Scrapp here, and a yard just to the east of him, and then 2 on the north side. I will say that when we're talking about the frontage, the entire frontage of the property itself, actually if a wall or landscaping were put in, there are gaps where there are entrances in. So actually the numbers that we're giving you are probably and intentionally just a little bit high so that we didn't want to undershoot what the requirement would cost. For the landscape option per 100 feet, we've estimated $2,000 for installation. For a 145-foot site, that'd be a little under $3,000. For the wall option, much more expensive. The wind loading requirements would kick in for an 8-foot tall wall. Again, one has already been done out there. And those expenses range from $15,000 to $20,000 per 100 feet. And you can see there the cost, and it's a bit of a range, obviously, for a 145-foot wall section or a 250-foot wall section. Precast panel walls are cheaper. They tend to installers tend to want longer stretches for those. So maybe a property owner would have to get together with a neighboring property to actually get an installer to do one of those jobs. But that's typically the type of dollar figure that we're looking at for the wall option. Again, it is an option. The landscaping option is much less costly. The process for these overlay regulations, the P&Z public hearing was required, has been conducted back in April. This is the first public hearing being conducted this morning, and the second one, the adoption hearing, is scheduled for June 3rd at 5:01 p.m. The Planning and Zoning Commission had 2 recommendations when they considered this project. One was to recommend that the board adopt the proposed overlay regulations, and the other was for the board to consider time-limited, maybe just a couple or a few months, incentive for the wall option for 45th Street junkyards. I think the P&Z concluded that the decorative wall option is preferred, maintenance-wise and so forth. and because of the cost, the potential costs involved, to try to give some incentives. And a number of incentives were discussed. One was waiving permit fees, building permit fees, or site plan fees. And of course, building permit fees can't be waived. They can be funded. And the total cost for an administrative approval and a building permit for a wall that, in this particular case, would be a total of $275. Another type of incentive the P&Z discussed was to expedite the reviews, to prioritize either the administrative approval or the building permit, or both, that would relate to a wall, to prioritize and put those ahead of any other applications that staff had. Both of those types of incentives, and we discussed this in staff's report, are certainly doable. The board can give us direction on that. The P&Z also didn't have any concrete ideas, but as far as some type of financial incentive, such as financing the walls, as we've indicated in staff's report, if all the remaining property owners wanted to pursue a wall, the total would be roughly $200,000. And to come up with a financing program and the effort that might be involved with that could be problematic. So we will look for your direction if you want us to develop that idea any further. But the first two certainly would be pretty easy to implement and would not be time consuming either for the applicant or certainly for staff. Staff's recommendation is that the board conduct a hearing this morning and direct staff to make any necessary changes to the proposed ordinance, and then announce your intention to adopt the ordinance at your June 3rd, 5:01 p.m. hearing. Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions of staff? Commissioner Fletcher?
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, I just want to say a special thank you to Stan for organizing this over the many years that we've been involved. I see a lot of people in the audience today that we all took a bus ride up to the cement plant, and it's been so long that I know that your lungs are now cleared, and with the passage and adoption of this overlay, we won't have to be concerned about that unless you all take a bus ride back up north. And I just want to say, Freddie, Joe, Tony, Mary, Joe, Doc, Linda, Marcy, thank you for all getting together. There were times in that room that I think someone thought that the glass was vibrating, that there was some contention. Well, there was contention. But thank you for seeing the resolve and expanding throughout the community those reductions in permitted uses. They stemmed about 200 when we first started. And to narrow it down to something that we could embrace as a community, as a local government, I say thank you to all of you. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis, any comments or questions of staff at this time? Commissioner Zork?
Yes. Stan, if you could go back to the overlay that showed there was two of them that showed the overlay of the areas of the perimeter that would be affected. And part of the question with that is where you had under either reduced uses petroleum. I've talked with a few people looking at doing a natural gas fueling station somewhere maybe in the 41st Street area, but I can see some of them were in the enterprise zone south, some looking at 41st Street. City Gas is doing or proposing, we don't know all the details yet, a significant natural gas line expansion in one. If that goes forward, that might bring forward a natural gas fueling station that might look to offer or some type of public-private partnership of some type where we might look at in the future adding some of our fleet types to natural gas if the numbers make sense. But if they're on the, because I know on the north side of 41st Street there's a couple of sites that are for sale, and I think they may have looked at those. I don't know if they did specifically.
It doesn't sound to me like, I'm not sure that use involves manufacturing petroleum products.
Okay, so I didn't know
fuel
where
dealers
petroleum
and handling fuel and breaking down distributing is not
fall into the petroleum use.
That's
okay,
correct.
Good.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's essentially, oil refinery is the type of use that.
Just when I saw petroleum, I didn't know where that would go.
Sure.
The on the wall type, would we be open to? I see that there's maybe 2 other wall types that could be added to the mix, and I can get with you on those. But when you do the 8-foot concrete wall, the wind resistance that we have for our area, every foot higher you go above 4 feet becomes exponentially much greater. As I've seen, and I'll have to see if I can find where the picture where I've seen these, but it's a blended wall. Maybe the first 4 feet's concrete, the next 4 feet is some other obscure, something that blocks the view, and it's an extension of the wall, but it allows some of the wind to pass through, so the structural requirements are not as great. And it may be another cost option that kind of falls in between 1 or 2 of the options.
Right, and one possibility, if there are structures like that out there, we could have wall or similar structure.
Okay.
Add that phrase in the regulations, and then we'd have the ability to review that.
Okay. And the existing property owners, whether it's, I know at the Thompson industrial area, he already has his wall privacy type of things up on the east side, and I'm not sure if it covers the frontage of 41st Street or not. That would be...
Gray wall.
I'm trying to see which street that would be. It's east of the red.
Talking about Jeff's?
Yes.
It's on 41st.
Right.
Just out in front, just about north of the transportation facility.
Where the Vero Mill Works subdivision, yes. I'm pointing at it with the cursor right here on the west side of, I believe it's 49th Avenue.
Right. So if he was to put in something, would he then have to look at doing another wall on 41st Street?
No, again, this requirement is simply for the existing junkyards that are along 41st Street and just along their 41st Street frontage.
Okay.
The 8-foot is required and has been required for decades in the county for junkyards to hide all the material that can get stacked up behind it, and that's why it's 8 feet.
Okay. And last, and here comes Mr. Thompson right there as we were speaking about him. So his particular site, he's not going to have to do anything additional because he's already gone over and above. I would.
That's correct. Again, this is, someone comes in for instance, on Mr. Thompson's lot that fronts on 41st Street, they'll be coming in with their landscape plan and so forth, but they won't be required to do the wall upgrade work that we're talking about. Right.
Okay. And then the Mr. Mulch facility that's to the west of that site we were discussing, I know at the prior meeting he had mentioned that he had bought the parcel to the east to expand as the economy improves. Since he had purchased it, the economy has not been that great, and he's done a number of cutbacks. But so if they were to expand in that area, do they only have to do the portion that's new, or do they have to retrofit and go back in front of their existing operation?
Right. They only have to do what the expansion area, the portion that's new. In fact, one thing that's been really helpful with the current owner is that recommendations from the fire department for how to maintain the piles and access and having water in there for fire protection, those are actually going to be requirements now with these proposed regulations. But essentially, he's already following what the guidelines, which will now be requirements that the fire department would apply. But that would apply only to the expansion area, the new requirements.
And the last item on the wall type, and I saw this creative used a number of years ago when the new, well, it's not new anymore, but the Reamar section that's south of, that has the considerable frontage on A1AY, they did the staggered wall, a 3-foot one, and then they did another one behind it, did another one, was apparently, as it was described to me, was to get around some of the city's height limitation rules, but because they broke it into 2 pieces with a berm. So is that type of creativity allowed where you can use a wall, some berm effects, as long as you get to the 8 feet through a combination of efforts? I mean, they'd have to submit it for somebody to say, hey, it meets it actually looks much nicer because then you get more landscaping features with it.
That's correct. You could, and again, I think adding or similar structure to the regulation would help with that.
Okay.
Berms tend to take some horizontal room as well. And
right.
In this particular case, and I did want to point this out in the agenda item, many of the 45th Street junkyards have their existing parking area, which is grandfathered in right off of 45th Street. And we specifically put it in the ordinance since February meeting that their right to continue that will not be infringed upon by this upgrade requirement.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of real world, if doing a berm in that area could give them some pinch them a little bit horizontally, possibly, unless they went deeper
Right.
into their site. And that would be their
And
choice.
Some will have the room to do it and some won't.
That would
So
be their
as long
choice.
as they have the flexibility to choose the least
right.
cost option
Certainly.
that works best for them. All right, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Commissioner Solari, anything?
I'll note is that I'm very good with the wall or similar structure, and if the P&Z believes that it'll help if the county pays for the building permit and we expedite the review, if it'll help get another wall up a little quicker, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just my 2 points. One is relating to the permitting fees and such. I think if we go forward with that, I think we should also offer to refund the ones that Mr. Scrapp paid, and if anybody else, just so we treat them all fair.
Right.
I don't want to penalize somebody that has moved forward, and so if we do agree that we'll internally pay for that, I think we should refund whatever fees that Mr. Scrapp paid. And then I was the dissenting vote prior to this, and that I did want to have the concrete plant and demolition debris removed. I'd still like us to consider removing the demolition debris plant for a couple reasons. One is, Commissioner Zork, you were not here, but the other four of us voted at a public hearing that a demolition debris site was not compatible in surrounding ag zoning, and I can't imagine either this commission or any future commission voting a demolition debris plant to be compatible anywhere near these other uses. It seems silly to keep it in there. And I realize staff put in the 300-foot buffer to any residential zoning, but looking at some of the allowed uses now, that the car wash, auto and home supply stores, boat, RV, motorcycle, car dealers, restaurants, computer and data processing, there's no 300-foot buffer for all of these uses that would have a large number of people coming into, and so while we put a 300-foot buffer in from residential, there's no other buffer from all these other uses where people will be. So I don't think that's adequate protection. And then finally, I'm not too worried about any type of Burt Harris Act here. The one demolition debris plant that we have approved, located directly opposite of the landfill, probably not a better location for success in the county than right there, has gone nowhere. So I think that there would be no, I don't think you'd make the argument that there is a reasonable, foreseeable land use that we're eliminating because the existing one has failed and it's in the best location you could think of. So I'm not too concerned about a Burt Harris Act there. So as we go forward, gentlemen, I just would like to ask you to keep that in consideration as we move forward. And I think that's all I had. And I'm good with the wording as well, a wall or equivalent. I think we already have some wording like that. Or
we just suggest or similar structure.
Or similar structure. I'm good with that as well. So, okay. This is a public hearing, so at this point we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak to this matter? And if anybody else, if you want to come up to this podium, we'll go back and forth if enough people wish to speak. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be before you again today after a few years. My name is Marcy Nolan, 1 Broward Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I am here today representing the Gifford Civic Association. We have been working on this project with staff, with the property owners, the business property owners in the Gifford area for about 2.5 years now. I came in about 2.5 years ago. They've been working on it much longer. We are in support of the proposal before you today. I do want to say that you have brought up some interesting points today that we are going to think about and talk about internally before the second reading and the adoption hearing. But for the most part, the way you're treating the three most contentious issues through the special permit process, special exception process, or the administrative permit process, we feel does provide the residents of the area an opportunity to come before the board or come before the commissioners and express their concerns, and also work with staff and the property owners to make sure the appropriate buffers are in place. I think that the Planning and Zoning Board had some wonderful recommendations regarding trying to incentivize upgrading the area earlier than the 2015 date, and we would support that option as well. And we look forward to working with you all in the future to see how the Gifford Bedford area grows. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Welcome. Your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Kathleen Yaskolski. I live at 5211 Eleuthera Circle in a development just adjacent to the property in question. And this is now my third time talking to you or to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm not in support of this recommendation, and the reason I'm not in support of it is because I don't feel as though the health and safety of residents is adequately protected. I do thank you, Commissioner O'Brien, for suggesting that we eliminate the demolition debris, and I had intended to remind the Commission that previously A1 Wally had been disapproved because of concerns for health and safety, and so the fact that it was being included in this plan was stunning to me, and so I wanted to remind the Commission that I think it was Commissioner Flesher who even made the motion that we weren't going to approve it because you were substantially concerned about the health and safety of the residents of the area, and yet it was included in this plan, and that was an area of concern. So thank you for bringing that up and putting the lights on that. Well, you've heard a lot of testimony from a lot of people. The people like me who are not attorneys and we don't belong to any organization, we just live in the community. I think if you look back on the record, all of us have said that we are concerned for the health and safety of our community. All of us have said we do not want a concrete processing facility in our neighborhood. And I think that's been very clear that we have not wanted that. And when I was preparing my remarks, I wanted to finally come to the conclusion that although I could read all the documents and I could go back to 2007 and 2009 and I could try to come up here and talk to you about land use agreements and decisions that the Commission has made in the past, I'm not an attorney. I'm just a citizen, and I'm concerned about our health and safety. We do have in our neighborhood 3 of the 5 concrete processing plants in our neighborhood. 3 of the 5 that are located in the county are in our neighborhood. They're at 31st and 53rd. They're Cemex is there. Tarmac is right across the street. Russell Concrete Processing is at, I think, 35th and 71st. This is all in our proximity. So the last time I talked to you, I asked you to think about the cumulative effect of these decisions and not just look at this little parcel of land, but to think about what would happen if now 4 of the 6 concrete processing plants were located in our immediate area. What would the cumulative effect be to our air and the quality of our life? And so I came today to say, I think this train is on the track. I think you guys are going to approve it. And I think that you're going to try to reassure us that you're going to regulate it with something called best practices. And when I spoke to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we talked a little bit about best practices. And my view from my business experience is that best practices are kind of fungible. They're kind of the best idea of what we should be doing, but they're not codified, they aren't regulated. And I think one of the Planning and Zoning Commissioners asked Stan about that, and he said, no, these will be regulated, but I haven't seen any documentation that says that they're going to be regulated. And as much as I agree that we should have flexibility with the mulch processing operations, and that because of unique circumstances, we don't think we should apply all the best practices to them, it's a case example of how fungible best practices are. And when all the good people in this room go away, somebody else's interpretation of what best practices are could be something completely different. And so I do think that there would be one thing that would make me feel a lot better, and that would be if you would ask the Department of Health to take a look at the current air environment from the 3 concrete processing plants that we have in the neighborhood, and then try to extrapolate or project, even with best practices overlay, what would that cumulative impact be? What would be the addition? Are we going to be at a tipping point? Is now that's going to be entirely too much dust, entirely too unsafe, to breathe, irritations to our skin, irritations to our eye, dust in our houses that we have to keep up with. What is the tipping point? How much concrete dust is okay and is permittable? And so we've kind of confined our discussion to this little plot of land, but when we look out and around, there is, dust blows. The wind moves it. It doesn't stay neatly in the little area that the plant lives in. So I'm still not concerned. I'm sorry, Commissioner Fletcher, I don't embrace this. I don't think it's a good idea to have a concrete processing plant in a residential community, and that is essentially what you're agreeing to. And then, I know I'm kind of going on and on, but I would like to say I think that if you approve this, you tie your hands. Because now, and you could say, well, Kathy, this is fully regulated, we're going to protect you, we're going to have people looking over and quantifying this, and don't worry about this, and we're not going to let any of this dust blow into your home, and you're not going to have to worry about skin disease and lung cancer. But, I just don't know if there's any safe level of concrete dust that we can breathe. I just don't know, how much we can be asked to bear. And the discussions in the planning and zoning meeting when I was there kind of devolved. I brought up the concern about health and welfare, and Stan dismissed it and said, no, this is going to be regulated. I haven't seen anything in writing to reinforce that or to tell me that. There are going to be these regulations, and they're going to be enforced through this department, and this is how we're going to know that our health and safety is protected. And and then the rest of the meeting devolved into discussion of shrubs, bushes, and fences. And so somehow all of our concerns, those of us who are just average residents, we're not attorneys, we're not representatives of any organization, we're concerned about the air that we breathe and the quality of life that we have in our neighborhoods, just as you would be in your neighborhood. And so we're just looking for you to act in our interest. There are a lot of people that I've spoken to. I don't pretend to speak for a lot of people, but there are a lot of people who have concerns about this, who work, who can't come to commission hearings, or have children to attend to and can't break away, or are just frankly too elderly to endure some of these long hearings. So you are hearing from some people who think this is a good idea, but I assure you there are many who are concerned about this, and they're concerned about the cumulative effect of heavy industrial industry in our residential community. So thank you again for your time. I'll keep showing up, but I hope you would consider asking the Department of Health for an opinion on what is the current state, and then ask them if they could extrapolate, even with the best practices overlay, what would be the effect of 4 of the 6 concrete processing plants right in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I don't have a problem writing a letter asking the Department of Health to do that. Is there any objection from the board?
I have no objection to that.
No? Okay. So, Kathy, I'll be glad to write the letter. I can't guarantee what they'll do, but certainly on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I'll send a letter requesting that they do that study for you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if we could ask to that same request to Stan, if you could get with, I don't know whose jurisdiction that completely falls under, but I know, take CEMEX, for example. They're a national company, so in some states they're regulated by EPA. In Florida, they may be by DEP. But I know the new plant that they have at 53rd Street in US 1 is the next generation technology, the dust and particulate containment. They spent millions on that to get that facility approved, because they don't just get a site plan from us. They have to get, to my understanding, other regulatory agencies' approval. So, secondly, is do we have any, and that's fairly close to both Grand Harbor and Waterway Village, and also the Gifford community in general. But when that plant went online, what I call full-time, where they closed the 12th Street plant, 12th Street, the railroad tracks, some time back, and they were operating both, and now they've closed that, and 100% of their operations are at 53rd Street. Do we track, or have we had any noticeable increase or calls of dust complaints or anything that you know of through your department?
None that I know of through code enforcement.
Okay. I think that technology is very good. Now, some of the other ones are older that are up there. So it'd be interesting to see how the health department or DEP might look at how do you break down the new guy that's cleaner than the old ones that are up there. Because the old ones are probably not as efficient like the one in O'Galley that the tour went on. I think I know where that one is, and you almost have to wear a dust mask if you're driving by in your car. It's pretty bad, but 53rd Street's seems to be fairly clean from what I can tell.
I think some of the protections that are afforded by the proposal is that by referring to a best management practices list, that list can be updated as technology and more information comes to us. It could be through DEP or our own Department of Health. So that list can be updated as time goes forward, and that updated list can be applied to any application that might come in the future. Also, I think the special exception process is going to put the burden on the applicant to demonstrate compatibility and to address health and environmental. So the cumulative impact, I think, might very well be a factor that any applicant would have to demonstrate, coming in at the conditions at the time of that application.
Right.
So that, that information would be more up to date if it came in at the time of an application, if an application comes in for you all, the decision makers. So I think that there are some strengths, and again, in the way that the proposed ordinance is structured, applicable items from the best management practices list that's in effect, that the list as it exists at the time of an application can be applied to an application. So it's in the code that it can be applied. And that determination is going to be made if and when an application comes in at the time of the application. So I think there are those protections in what's being proposed.
Kathy, do you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a follow on it. Commissioner Zork, this is in relation to Cemex and Tarmac concrete processing, which are really just down the road from where I live. And I'm not a fastidious housekeeper, but I promise you, every 2 days, I have like a coating on all of my surfaces. And I have a really super high-efficiency air filter and processing, and I promise you, the particulates and the stuff that comes off of those plants, even though they sprinkle and they water them down, it's coming into our neighborhood and it's coming into our houses. So, I think anyone who does an honest reading of the quality of air it won't be hard to prove that. So I applaud you in your curiosity, because my empirical experience living next to it is that, in fact, we're breathing that stuff every day. So.
What else? Thank you. And I know the Tarmac plant is probably closer to 20 years old, probably older technology. You also have the millings recycling operation through one of the paving companies where they're taking aggregate millings and converting that and getting it back into asphalt that's going out. So you have multiple craters of dust particulate, I guess. It's not just the concrete, it's the other folks as well.
Right. That's a good point. So it's the cumulative sum of all of the IG environment, and, so what my position, I stand against adding to that. It is what it is right now. We'd like to make it better, but I don't see any reason under God's earth why we should add to that. So.
Thank you, Kathy. Kathy, could you just make sure Stan has your full name and address and email and contact information so we can follow up with you, please?
Sure.
I'll be glad to copy you on the letter to the
Okay, super.
department. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Joe Adelet, 4570 57th Avenue. And the proposed code change is something we have been working on with staff, county commissioners, and the surrounding property owners for at least the last 2 years. And we thank everyone for all their hard work. It's been this has been a difficult journey. The county adopted the Gifford Neighborhood Plan back in 2000. In that report, specific goals and objectives were identified to contribute to the economic development of the Gifford community. One that was identified was the need to develop zoning regulations to increase the compatibility between the existing industrial and residential users of the area. The code change before you today achieves that goal. After many long meetings, probably achieved that goal to the best of its ability. After many long meetings with both residential and industrial property owners, it was determined that as opposed to focusing on uses, which are afforded legal protection, a better strategy was to focus on areas of agreement such as walls, landscaping, setbacks, and the public hearing process. These changes will make a dramatic improvement in the overall economic prosperity of the Gifford area over the next several years. I thank you in advance for your support of the supposed code change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Dan Lamson, 737 Timber Ridge Trail, Vero Beach. The IRNA supports this idea. We were here back in February, and we spoke on this as well. Staff and the communities have done a great job working together to come up with this kind of a plan, a compromise. Because I think some people would want everything completely banned, and other people would want everything allowed. So it's a good working compromise, I think, and I think it will have good effects for the neighborhood. I'm encouraging you to pass this. We've worked with several people from Gifford and interested parties, and they are supportive of this. And so I'm hoping you'll move it forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else wish to speak? Althea, Penny and then Althea. Okay, thank you.
Just briefly, we support this measure. We think it's important to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods, and appreciate the fact that you all have worked and staff has worked so hard along with the people in the community to make this all work out. So we give our support.
Good. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Althea McKenzie, 245 16th Avenue. I believe that this policy making and this decision is not in the best interest of the residents that are in the community. And I have a few questions for Mr. Bowling or Mr. Beard, whoever would like to answer that question. According to your list, you're making special exceptions for certain industries to exist. And I noticed that in the PowerPoint that you did not include utilities, public utilities and uses. And I'd like to get a definition of what those are, please.
Yeah, public utility uses are allowed in most of our zoning districts to serve the area, every area really of the county. So it could be something on the order of a electrical substation. It could be a pumping station for water service, that sort of thing. But in this particular case, one specific type of utility that would be prohibited would be a sewer plant or a landfill. So that's why we separated those out to prohibit them from this particular area.
One of the reasons that I particularly object to this particular process is because the original conversation that started was to look at compatibility, consider the residents, and it was mentioned that the zoning at the time was outdated because it was developed in a time where this particular part of the county was the outskirts. And therefore, the request was to change it to industrial light. We have right now a power plant substation that exists in this space that has high power lines that are right over residential homes. In addition to that, there is a telecommunications tower, which is located right in the middle of this property as well. There's the Gifford landfill, which is less than a block, which has been part of the Piper Superfund and has been deemed as contaminated. And then there is proposals to add additional industries that would continue to environmentally harm the residents, the plants, and the people there. When the tower and the power plant went in, I'm not sure who can answer this question, were the residents notified of that particular utility being installed and what the hazards would have been?
Right. Neither of those, you're talking about the substation that's kind of to the north and west of this area, I believe, and then the tower that's in this particular area. With respect to the tower that was put up within the last year and a half, the email contact list was used. There were some residents or community leaders from Gifford at the technical review committee meeting. That was a staff level approval. I will say that with respect to towers, any tower anywhere in the county, not just Gifford, there are federal preemptions with respect to radiation type of effects. In fact, local governments, including this one, have lost lawsuits where that's been raised as a means to deny such a tower. So we actually cannot take into account radiation effects with respect to local requirements, and did not with that particular tower. But they did meet all of the county's tower requirements and actually exceeded them. With respect to the substation, I believe that was an administrative permit use. I don't believe that there was a public hearing for that required and none conducted. And at the time that that went in, there was not the process that we've had in place since 2009 now to contact community leaders. So if a new substation were to go in anywhere in the Gifford area, there would be contact now.
So we did not, as a county, take precautions to notify the residents in that area to let them know of any potential hazards so that they could make the decisions as to whether they wanted to still sleep under the power lines. I did a lot of research before coming in, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to go over, other than the fact that as a county commission, part of your responsibilities is to make sure that there is public safe and health standards. And when I did the research on microwavable emissions and transmissions from cell towers and also from high power lines, one of the recommendations that was on this particular website, for what it's worth, recommended that there was two ways to deal with high power lines. One of them was to avoid them at all cost and to spend as little time or put as much distance as possible. The distance recommended was 3 kilometers, which is 1.86 miles. So while we go ahead and do a survey on air quality, I think it would be in the best interest of the Gifford residents who currently sleep under these power lines and telecommunication towers and anything else, natural gas or anything else that will be proposed at a later time, to have the advantage to know what they're subjecting themselves to. Some of the things that have been brought up in these particular substations and high power lines is that they cause brain cancer, they accelerate Alzheimer's, they have been noted to be related to Parkinson's disease, and there is a current decline of residents in that area, people who have been committed to live in Gifford and have retired there, and therefore it is my opinion, whether medical or health or whatever, that this is a poor decision and not in the best interest of the residents. Because in the special exceptions, you excluded explaining that you can add at any time additional elements just like the ones we described. And one of the things that I've noticed is that there's a thing called, and it's kind of a word that nobody likes to discuss, but when there's an impoverished area, you either have social disadvantages, social distribution of resources disadvantages, economic trends, institutional disadvantages. And institutional disadvantages, or, and I'll use the word, racism, is where one group sets policies that intentionally or do not, or unintentionally sets rules and policies that will provide a disadvantage for one group of people. Now, I don't think this is race-based. And it was interesting because the only people that had this information was Australian and South African websites, people who were not willing to ignore that they had spent years putting different subgroups at disadvantages. But one of the most interesting things was something called environmental racism. And it is the placement of low-income or minority communities in the proximity of environmentally hazardous or degraded environments such as toxic waste, pollution, or urban decay. It not only And there are examples of this several places. What's disturbing about this is we're actually bringing the toxins to this community. We're saying it's okay to tolerate or compromise or live with these exceptions. I find it to be very disheartening that our government is not exercising good government practices and looking out for the best interests of the families that live in this area, that the children that go to school across the street are not valued enough to be protected, that we have already existing industries that are already harming the community, and that this overlay, which is again a compromise, an exception, we're going to do something different. And nobody wants to admit that it is discriminatory, because you are making exceptions in order to exercise certain policies and allow certain things to happen that will cause long-term damage. Now, one of the things that as a government entity, they always say that there's something called tort, and you read these things, and it's the unintentional or intentional way of setting a policy that may later cause damage. I have spoken to many agencies, and I have been told on many times that the things that are done in Indian River County are immoral, unethical, but they're not illegal. And so therefore, setting this policy will make it legal for you to continue to contribute pollutants to the community that not only will affect Gifford, but the other areas. I believe there are better alternatives that need to be explored. I believe that putting a blind eye or blinders on this situation is direct negligence, and it's failure to take sufficient care in fulfilling your duties owed. I don't really like to tackle things under the theme of racism. I've always struggled with it. I've always walked away from it. And being the product of a biracial parents, I really don't believe that it truly has to exist. But I believe when it does, that you need to bring the elephant in the room, and you need to address the problem, and you need to call things what they are. However, I would like to move past that, because most people don't like to talk about it. Some people want to ignore it, and it makes people uncomfortable. This boils down to simply what's good and what's right and what's best for the people that live in this area that are affected, whether it's 1 mile, 500 feet, 5 miles, or 10 miles. You also have a water table that is located underneath this particular property that needs to be considered for future use in case you need a fresh water supply. This is bad government, and I would ask for you to take full consideration on what you're doing, because even though it's not illegal, it's criminal.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Left and right.
Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Jeff Thompson, Seville Avenue, Vero Beach. Not sure how to follow this one. The concerns I had before and same concerns I have now is you all passing something to make property owners spend money to improve property, to do whatever the code says. I just think that's not right. Hopefully you all come up with a way to come up with some funds to help these business owners out. This horse is so far out of the gate. This is a foregone conclusion. This thing's a slam dunk. I know that. I hope it'll do what you all intend it to do. And I hope this is, this not in my backyard thing. I use the term slippery slope. Unintended consequences could come out. You know, I look at something that happened down in the moorings when a Publix wanted to go in down there. People said, you know, we don't want that. What'd they do? They whipped out their checkbook. I'm still got that offer, Joe. I'm ready to sell anytime y'all want to come up. But I know that's not going to happen. I appreciate all the hard work everybody's put into this. I really do. I'm concerned about, again, say, unintended consequences, and this not in my backyard that is going to mushroom. You know, this is, you know, that Wally thing that happened down there. It was going to go on that Jordan piece of property. My gosh, that was too close, so they moved it another quarter-mile away. You know, it's unfortunate. We all have things, you know, that we live near. I don't live too far from the airport. I'm not complaining about the airport noise. You know, I chose to live there. I just hope this thing turns out for the best, and we can move forward, get this thing off dead center, because it's taken a heck of a lot of time and energy and money to get to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Yes. William Mosley, representing William Mosley as well as the Gifford Economic Development Council. As the gentleman said, several things. He didn't choose to live there. Well, first of all, we lived there before the gentleman, they brought the property. And as concerned citizens, I like to go on record. I was explaining to her that if the overlay was the only thing that we had available, then we need to go forward on that. But this is something that really is not good for the community, because we're talking about the quality of life. Right now, we've had contamination from the dump, people getting cancer. There are a lot of people with respiratory problems in our community. And just think about it, fly ash in the air. Now, I was reading some of the restrictions. You're talking about 2 years of the air quality as far as, testing the air quality. It should be more than 2 years. It should be every year or every 6 months. Because this is something we're talking about, the quality of life, and then there's going to be new development in the area. So we have safety concerns for our community and our citizens. And last time I checked, I think you all work for us. We're the taxpayers. You're all elected officials. We, the bulk of us, have submitted to you what our desires are. And if that be the case, then I think we should be honored by you doing our will. And for the most part, if we don't have to have, I don't want it there. It's not going to help our community. It doesn't create that many jobs. And again, we have new development ready to go around there. There's new expansion of residential areas that, we would like to see more homeowners, more tax base, so that we can create, environmentally safe jobs. But right now, I like to go on the record. I understand I was on the thing saying that I'm for. I'm totally against it. But if this is the only result we have for it, then let's put in safeguards. And as far as they were saying, an ad hoc committee that will go on the property once a year. If we're going to have an ad hoc committee from the community go in to investigate or at least do a supervised visit over the plant, they need to have authority. And if they don't have authority, they just have lip service just to come tell you, well, this is wrong. We're seeing air contaminants going in there. We're finding on people air conditioners, we're finding dust, ash, and different things around the neighborhood. But they said they were in compliance. Then apparently they're not. So if this group would not have teeth, that when they do visit the site, we're wasting our wind. So if we're going to create an ad hoc committee representing the community, they need to have police powers and authority when they do a site visit. So those are some of the things that I want to add. I kind of perused the changes that that you all were submitting as far as the exemption or the special exemption. These are some of the things I ask you gentlemen to consider, because for the most part, we are the taxpayers. We pay your salaries, not just one individual. So, when the bulk of us speak, then, someone needs to listen to us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Welcome. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Commissioners, staff, and concerned citizens. My name is Leonard Kaczynski. I live at the Lakes at Sandridge. I'd like to bring up a couple of things that haven't been mentioned yet. First, I have little knowledge of these prior events, so I apologize for the informal presentation. I do support the refining of the intent of legislation. I'd like to discuss, before I discuss, the rare resources that will be necessary, the wastewater collection, and the enforcement of high standards required by technicians to be trained on the yard and equipment of concrete batch processing. The first thing I'd like to bring up is from the concrete producer. What is our break-even point? How many yards do we have to pour before we can pay for the basic, the beginning startup costs for this? So I didn't hear that. There's a half a dozen different kind of concrete batch processing plants. There's commercial that just strictly do commercial concrete. There's the belt fed. There's the silos. There's all kinds of. There's a brief. That's just the basic one. That's not important right now. There are standards for mixing water and concrete, and the U.S. Green Council provides the Green Book of for the concrete industry. I've provided all this information. It's available for you later. Part of it is treating and recycling the concrete processed water, the wastewater from the processes of agitating, washing out the agitators on the trucks, the truck washing, the yard washing. Where's the contaminated stormwater going? There needs to be a system set up prior, an infrastructure to catch these acetylene ponds, so to say, and it should be lined. So that's very important because there's a lot of metals. There's arsenic, there's selenium, there's cadmium. All those metals are all involved in the processing of concrete batch processing, and they should be monitored. There's also employee education and community education, where with checklists for the general site operation, maintenance, the loading, the conveyors. There's checklists for all that. I didn't see any of that involved in there. And lastly, there's 250,000 individuals who are to work in the concrete industry. 10% of those are hurt every year. So it's about 25,000 people are hurt every year. 42 end up as fatalities. So it is a dangerous business. There should be standards set up, integrated into the design before the first steps are taken. Thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions?
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
This information will be available to you. Thank you.
If you could, please make sure the clerk gets a copy of it. That'd be great.
Sure will.
Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak? Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public hearing. Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Fleischer.
I had a question for Stan regarding the demolition and debris. Yeah, I got a question. And could we explain to the public why that is not included in the overall overlay?
I'm sorry, which demolition debris?
As far as the demolition and debris processing that was earlier discussed.
It's treated as a separate use, requiring special exception approval with stringent criteria and the burden on the applicant to prove compatibility and meeting all the health requirements. That's the way that the overlay regulations are proposed.
And I believe the public needs to be assured that we have the appropriate address for those best management practices. If such a plant was approved, a processing agent was approved,
that's correct.
That we have the enforcement capacity and ability to ensure the public safety.
We do, and in fact, the best management practices list that we currently have is really meant and structured to ensure compliance with state and federal requirements. They have the expertise to set the appropriate requirements. And the best management practices would support those agencies to make sure that any facility complies, design and operation.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the proposed WGIC overlay regulations, inclusive of the two P&Z recommendations regarding the fence and wall exception, waiving the fee, and expedite the permitting process to ensure compliance, and also include the financial consideration to direct staff to explore and come up with all of the financial concerns that may be addressed for those coming to compliance. And in addition, the combination wall that was recommended, I'd like to have that included into the staff's consideration as well.
As simply or similar structures?
Yes.
I'll second it.
Just under clarification, in the staff report that they did support a limited time offer on the incentives to pay the application and permit fees, but staff's position was that any type of financing would be problematic. So are you going along with the staff recommendation?
Yes. However, I am asking us to direct staff to explore any and all opportunities for financing of any adjustments to come into compliance for the business owners.
And Mike, and if I may, I'm agreeing with Commissioner Flesher here on that, and I'll tell you why. Is, you can look at it as the financial infliction is substantial. It just depends on which side of the fence you're on. Who does it hurt the most?
No pun intended.
Exactly. And with that, though, I think there's not a commissioner up here that doesn't want to improve the aesthetics of a community. And at the same time, we've seen individuals that run specific industries that might seem that are intense. There's no half ways about it, but can have the opportunity to have an aesthetically pleasing storefront. And to just go out there, in my opinion, just like Mr. Thompson said, it's probably at the end of the day, nobody's going to be tickled 100% with this. I'm going about as hard and as far as I feel like I can go in both directions. And so I would like to see something specifically as we come in there and perhaps look at culverting some of the ditches that we've been battering around a little bit with the Gifford neighborhood plan. That's not going to be cheap. But at the same time, at the end of the day, it will make for a much better looking community. And at the end of the day, that's something I think that the business owners can agree to, as well as the residents that live in the Gifford community, or even those that live on the outskirts of the Gifford community.
Okay. So that was a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Solari. Commissioner Zork, you had comments?
Nothing additional at this time.
Okay. So Commissioner Solari, you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Jim? So just to make sure we're clear on the motion, is to move forward with staff recommendation in including not only waiving the permitting fee and including the expedited review, but also instruct staff to look at financing options on the walls, and to also include the wording the wall or similar structure.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner, sorry?
On the motion, I think the one change is it's not waiving the fee, it's having the county pay for the fee.
Exactly, yeah, okay.
And reimbursement.
I stand correct. And reimbursing the current owners that have already moved forward on the wall? Okay.
Those who've come into compliance.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Okay, sir. Okay. Any final discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 5-0. The next hearing is June 3rd at 5 o'clock in the evening here in the County Commission chambers. And that will be the final public hearing on this, and the vote at that time will be the final county action on this. Okay? With that, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back at, call it 11 o'clock.
I think we're going to be north of $15,000 for it. We were at 8. It's a tough one. Yeah. There's been a lot of skin thrown in the game already. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for all your work with us. I don't know if there might be a way. No, we won't. Sometimes you get a burger on here before they put it. So, just, sauces up, yeah. Should be, yep. That welcomed up the world we live in. Yeah, you would want it all to be based on scientific facts. That
Call the meeting back to order. That concludes the public items. One public discussion item we had moved to the next week at the speaker's request. It's no county administrator matters. Moving on to departmental matters. First up is the Office of Management and Budget. miscellaneous budget amendment 015, memorandum dated May 7, 2014. I think staff just brought this on as a regular agenda item. There is one significant addition here is staff is recommending some catch-up capital items for road and bridge and traffic engineering. That is a $963,500 capital item, which will be from the Transportation Fund cash forward. Is there any other discussion on any of the other budget amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on item number 10, not against the item at all, but as we move forward, I kind of look at...
Could you just specify what the item deals with?
Item number 10 is dealing with the FMPA, FPL issue. As we move forward with this, I kind of look, this is the entry fee to get into the game, and that I think mentally we need to start preparing that. To me, a ballpark is if your 1 year savings is about $800,000, give or take for us, that over a period of time we could easily, to keep this challenge moving forward to a successful resolve, and also partnering with anybody else, any of the other municipalities that might want to work towards a common goal. But the $100,000 is a portion of what we'll be looking at committing in the long term, and I think this combined with other efforts that are going to take place. But as I will be at the FMPA meeting this Thursday, I want to make sure that they know that the $100,000 is just to get the game, but we're willing to commit significant dollars behind this as it goes forward, as the county attorney would recommend to get us to a successful outcome. So.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Floyd?
Yeah, when I brought that item up, I think I mentioned that I expected the $100,000 just to be sort of like the opening bid.
Right.
That I just wanted to put a limit on it because I wanted it to come back before us in the public at a regular basis.
Sure.
I remember once the city had something with attorneys, and it was suddenly $500,000 before anybody had heard anything again.
Great.
When they, I think, initially authorized $25,000.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, perhaps Commissioner Solari or Commissioner Zork, either one of y'all, obviously not together, but get with the county administrator, and let's go ahead and start budgeting this for next year's budget as we put it together. I think that'd be the most appropriate thing than having budget amendments throughout the year.
And I think also what Commissioner Solari is saying, we're going to keep a spreadsheet, and every time we cut an invoice to the attorney, we're going to send it to the commission, and we're going to put it on the agenda.
That's a good point. I think we ought to have a budget item in there for the next year, and I think that if we ask the county administrator to actually talk with Jim O'Connor with the city of Vero Beach, just to get the background information of what the sort of consumption rate of attorney time was in their actions, that'll give us a sort of basis and starting point. But I think that's a wonderful idea.
Good. And that way it's there. We'll still have the same updates, but it'll kind of give our commitment.
Yeah, it'll have it in the budget. Yeah. So we'll be well planned for it, but we'll also, I think, ought to have periodic public announcements of how
transparency on both ends. Absolutely.
Almost even on at least on a monthly basis, or more frequent if something, because I think this is going to be moving at somewhat of the turnaround on the PSC complaint is somewhat of a short window once it gets in. So some are going to move faster, some are going to move slower, but maybe look at doing a monthly update on those initiatives.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff on the budget amendment?
Move staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slaughter, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Jason. That then takes us on to the county attorney's matters. The first item is a Division of Emergency Management request for reimbursement of $1,731,742.37 relating to a FEMA appeal. Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much to the chair and to the commission, those in the audience and those watching at home. Back in September 2004, this community was hit by Hurricane Francis and Hurricane Jeanne, and these storms have caused significant problems from our community, including in the area of Rockledge, where we saw significant sewer problems and sewer system failures. And as a result of that, the county worked with FEMA, worked with the state, and came up with a plan and funding
for being able to improve that system. And that's exactly what this commission did. They made the improvements, and we've seen a great fix that we have not had reoccurring problems. We're clearly a great solution to the problem that this community faced in 2004. However, in 2010, FEMA decided to deobligate those funds, and we've essentially been involved in an appellate process since then. We filed our second appeal in January 2013 with FEMA, and we're still waiting for a result. However, in the interim period, the state has been looking to us for essentially reimbursement of the money that's been deobligated. And the letter that you received today, essentially, or what we'd received at the end of April, essentially said, look, we'd like you to refund the $1.7 million that you still owe us of deobligated funds that was removed from us from FEMA. Back in 2012, they made a similar request, sending us an invoice, and Jason Brown at the time wrote a very excellent letter back to the state, explaining to them, look, we have an appeal, and we're not in a position to send you $1.7 million at the time. Well, clearly they got that message and included that in this letter, saying, we understand you have an appeal. However, still please understand, we have other communities and subgrantees who need funds, and therefore we need the deobligated money back. Since the time that I drafted this memo, I've had an opportunity to reach out to our outside counsel, and Jason Brown and I actually yesterday had a conversation with the folks at the Division of Emergency Management. And we were kind of trying to gauge any sense that they may have in terms of our ability to seek some sort of partial payment, maybe a payment plan or the like. The best they could offer us was pay us $1.7 million over a 12-month period. It wasn't much of a discussion. At this point, the best option is to recommend that we pay the $1.7 million by the June 27th date in the letter. And please understand, I do not make this recommendation lightly. But there are three key things I think are important to understand. First off, I do strongly believe in our litigation position in this case, and I do think we prevail. However, under our contract with the state, it simply states that if there is money that is deobligated, then we have to immediately return those funds to the state. And if we don't, they will withdraw money from any other eligible project. Mm-hmm. Second, we've already, as I understand from Jason Brown, we've essentially already listed the loss in our books. So at this point, all we're really arguing over is who holds the $1.7 million while the appeal is pending. And finally, what I think is really also important to understand is if we don't send the money back to the state, we hurt the state, the party that's essentially been our partner in this endeavor, party who's written favorable letters to FEMA, and they're not the bad actor. The bad actor here in my mind has been FEMA, and essentially not returning the money to the state doesn't punish the bad actor, it merely punishes the state who's been our partner. And with that, I simply recommend that we respond to the state and we provide the $1.7 million back that has been deobligated by the deadline set in January 27th. With that recommendation, I turn it back over to the board.
Commissioner Davis?
I don't know if I'll get 3 votes for that, but I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and move staff a recommendation and we do it in pennies.
I'll second that, and I have a question of the attorney once move that forward.
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to vote for that if we're actually going to do it in pennies. It'll cost more in staff time putting it together than I believe it would cost us in lost interest for the year.
Could we go nickels?
Question on the deobligated funds as they're in the deobligated status. If the status changes and the funds become obligated again, how long does the obligated path take to come back around again?
That's a great question, and we didn't get from the state how long it would take, but certainly we would reach out to them and make sure that's a question that we address them before we send any money.
I know to them. From beach funding requests where we partnered with them, and we're on probably year 4, roughly, of that time period, so I don't want to have to give it back, and then if it gets obligated funds again, then we have to wait 4 years on the other side. So, I mean, somewhere I know they're not the bad apple here of what's going on, but I don't want to at the same time have to fight really hard to get it back if it gets re-obligated on our appeal.
Yeah, see, the federal government is withholding the money from the state.
Right.
And so we think we should pay the state back. Also, if we had a hurricane or a major storm this year, they would withhold it. It would put us in a bad situation with the state as far as the pass-through money to our county. And I don't think that's worth that to our citizens. Right. And the third thing is we've already booked this as an expense already. Okay. And because it's a liability, to be on the safe side, we did that last year.
Good. We've got a motion in a second.
We do have a motion from Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Zork, to pay the $1.7 million in pennies.
Mr. Chairman?
Hang on, Althea. Commissioner Fletcher?
I just want to clarify now. I find the motion very intriguing and rewarding, and it might send a very strong message. But I do have a concern that we might be punishing again. Who will be counting this money?
Oh, we can get them in rolls.
No, but who will be counting? The state will actually be counting the money, correct?
Hopefully the federal government just ask for a deposit slip and come pick them up.
No, it's the state that's going to get it. The idea of paying this is to keep the state happy with us. Sending the pennies to the state instead of the federal government will just get the state upset with us.
Strong
message. The whole purpose of paying it will be undermined by the payment in pennies.
Yes. Thank you very much for seeing my point.
Commissioner Davis,
clarification. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis, maybe define a middle ground is we could the total amount does include 37 cents. Would you like to send the 37 cents with a check?
I don't suppose we could pay it in cash, could we?
I think.
I mean, somewhere other than an electronic transfer that's so convenient.
I think that it's just a professional way to handle an electronic transfer, and off we go.
But I do like the 37. You can do the check and then put 37 pennies in the envelope.
All right. That's the best I can do.
I want to say yes because I admire the spirit, but I think we'll be punishing the wrong
amended to pay $1,756,954 by check, and including in the check an envelope with 37 pennies.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I'll suggest that in the accompanying letter with the check, we just note that we had to fight that down from
great debate
for 170.
The motion did get a second, didn't it?
Ms. McKenzie, would you like to comment on the motion?
No, I don't have a comment on the motion. I have a question. My name is Althea McKenzie, 2405 16th Avenue. These funds that are being reimbursed to FEMA, why are they being reimbursed? Is it for a specific project?
Okay, back in 2004, after the hurricanes, the county applied for some FEMA funds. One of the big projects was the sewer system in Rockledge. We did get authorization and approval from FEMA to move forward, and they obligated the funds to us. Then some 6 years later, after completion of the project in 2010, FEMA just kind of out of the blue decided they were going to de-obligate those funds. And so how it works is FEMA funds are transferred from FEMA to the state, and then the state allocates them to the projects that have been approved. My understanding is that FEMA has now yanked $90 million out of the state's coffer, so to speak, and so we are reimbursing the state those FEMA funds that were allocated to us by the state.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that question is because at some point, and I don't have the research, I'm not going to be able to pull it up right now, is that Rockledge might have failed from the engineering point? Is that why the funds were requested back?
No, I understand it was because we started just a little bit before we were allowed to start or something.
No, actually, the Rockledge system, do you mean the old system or the new system?
Well, in the last slow rainfall that you had, there was still flooding in that whole entire area as far as being north of Rockledge. But the purpose of my question, so I can just jump to it and not take you guys through all of this and have to use my memory, is were there any additional funds attached to this particular project that will be refunded as well?
No, and this money was not for flooding or stormwater. This is for a sewer system. This was for the sewer system to be put in Rockledge. It was not anything to do with
sanitary sewer, not
sanitary sewer.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with the CDBG grant that was transferred to Rockledge to assist with that project.
What project?
There was a CDBG grant that was issued, and from what I understand, some members of your executive group that you have assigned, kind of funny, signed the CDBG grants over to assist with the Rock Ridge project. Is that a part of this particular funds that are being asked to be reimbursed?
Jason?
No, we did use some CDBG funds for the Rock Ridge project as well. That grant has been closed out. The state has no issue with that.
Okay, and what was the CDBG for? It wasn't for this project to partner with this?
We received CDBG Disaster Recovery Initiative grant after the storm for $7.5 million. We did various things with that. One of those was we built rebuilt the fire station. We used some of the funds towards Rock Ridge. We did some Wabasso water improvements, and one of the sources one of the projects was a portion of the Rock Ridge program. That grant has been closed out. CDBG has no issue with this. The project has been a demonstrated success, and FEMA's reasoning for pulling the funds back has nothing to do with the effectiveness of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Scott, do you have a question on the motion in hand?
No, I had a question on the deobligation funds. I think a portion of that was clarified, and even with the CBG, because that's the first thing when I popped up, it's like I'm kind of perplexed here with what was the recovery? What was this money? Why did it become deobligated? What is it that we failed on, the county, for them to deobligate the funds and requests? I know some of it, and then some of it I do not. So I just wanted to be clear. So Mrs.
Here's what happened.
McKenzie.
Here's what happened. The FEMA is saying the individual that worked for them that approved the project should never approve the project.
Okay.
Even though he worked for them and he was their head guy, he working for them on salary, he approved it, and they just said that he should never have approved the program after we've completed it, and they've signed off and said it meets all their specifications.
He should have never approved the project of the sewage or the sewer at Rock Ridge. Okay. Because we're looking back at it's always the question about our dilapidated homes in Gifford and where's the fundings or what happened to the funding for recovery. So when stuff like this come up, of course, I'm always looking for an angle or to be able to tie in, because our area right now is in gross negligence. I mean, it's the worst, dilapidated, and I'm just trying to find out where these funds are. So we're still doing a lot of research, and we're going back in dates too, and pulling up records to see why our community is in such despair with the amount of money that's coming through Indian River County and the amount of taxes that we are paying into this county. Why is our community looking like this? It's not directly, but it could be. So I'm just digging, and I'm just trying to get clarity on the deobligated funds. What happened? Could those possibly be funds that was meant for Gifford?
These funds came out of the water and sewer fund. They're not coming out. They're not being paid back out of taxpayers' money. They're being paid out of the water and sewer enterprise fund.
Enterprise fund?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm still digging. We got to find out why our community is in the state and it is in, and where are the funds, where are our tax dollars. So I'll come back. I'll be back.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. With the permission of the maker of the motion, Dylan, when we send this, I'd like it that if we would include a cover letter saying that we don't agree with having to reimburse this, that we still are actively protesting it, that the fact we're sending this back does not mean we are admitting that it's that Jill, you know what I'm saying, just
Absolutely, to the chair. No, I think that's a very important point to make sure that it's clear to both the state and the federal government that this is in no way deemed to be an admission of our position in the litigation.
Right. And go ahead and say hence the 37 pennies.
And hence the 37 pennies.
Also,
like
might
that.
Negotiated down from $1 billion.
One vote away from. One vote away from.
One lousy vote away.
I don't know, unless you want to maintain that.
Would it be too far as to also say is that if at such time our appeal is successful, that the funds be then returned back to the county if the appeal is successful, to just kind of round all that out?
Yeah, and that would clarify their statement in their letter, which was, if you win your appeal, we will be reimbursing the county. So I'll make it clear as soon as possible would be the desire.
Rub it in, you would have each of us throw in 7 pennies each, just so
We'll do that.
we're all in.
In a day. Okay. Just show them we got skin in the game.
All right, we do have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second by Commissioner Zorg, to send a check to the state for the full amount less the 37 cents that will be included as pennies. All in favor of the motion signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I guess that carries unanimously, so we'll move forward.
Thank you, Commissioners. I feel a little bit better.
Very good.
We aim to make you feel better.
Under this next matter of the county attorneys, it might be difficult to get 3 votes here, but we'll see how it goes. This is the second county attorney's annual employment agreement. The only change is that the salary was reflected to be concurrent with the current salary. We had a motion, I think it was Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner Davis.
I think I already did that, but that's
okay. Just real brief comments. I would like to say that I believe Dylan has done an outstanding job. I can't believe it's a year already. It's just flown by. But I think the county attorney's office is running 110%. And I appreciate all Dylan's done and his adoption not only to the job but also the community. I know he and his wife are very active, running around doing things here in town. So,
well, heck, Mr. Chairman, I think Dylan did okay the first year, but I certainly hope he shows a lot of improvement over the second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Davis to approve the employment agreement. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That one squeaks by a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, Councilor.
If I may, I just want to say thank you. It's been a true honor this past year to serve you guys. And also, the staff that I work with is amazing, from Bill and Kate to Nancy and Linda and Sandy are all amazing. And, it makes your job a lot easier when you have amazing staff.
Well, Councilor, you did make some, and I thought it was going to be tough to make any positive changes, and when Alan decided to retire, but you have made those positive changes, and you are almost unescapable once we enter into the building. Thank you for continually checking and ensuring that we are up to date on everything that's happening in the legal practice here at Indian River County Government. Thank you.
Moving on to commissioner matters, I would like to point out that the same commissioner as 2 items today took up nearly 2 hours at the last meeting. I certainly hope he's more expeditious today. And with that, we'll turn to Commissioner Bob Solari. His first item today is all aboard Florida.
Maybe you could speed up the train.
Memorandum dated May 7th, 2014. Commissioner Solari.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to move forward at a good pace. Recently, all of Florida East Coast Industries and All Aboard Florida came and made a request to FRA to extend the comment period for the draft environmental impact statement, which is anticipated to come out somewhere at the end of May to the early part of June. And they asked the FRA to extend that period from 45 days to 75 days, and evidently that seems to have been well received by the FRA. Myself and others had asked Mr. Roberts and Mr. Signorello of FECI to do that, and I just want to publicly acknowledge that they did go forward, and I think that's a positive step. Additionally, as part of the public process, they had 6 public forums scheduled in the 8 counties, and they've agreed to increase that to 8, so that each county will have at least one public forum. I'd like to make 2 other comments on that. One is that I found it very interesting that when multiple community leaders, commissioners, city council members, even some members of the United States House had requested they increase that to 90 days, that basically that request seemed to have been ignored. But right after all aboard Florida people asked them to increase the request to 75 days, it was received very well. So one thing I'd like to do is, at the Friday Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, ask the council and all the members of the council to again write to the FRA and ask them to increase it to 90 days. If it's easy enough to increase it to 75 days based on one request from all aboard Florida, I think upon multiple requests from the citizens in the area, 90 days is very reasonable. So if the board has no objection to that, I'll do that this coming Friday. One other point is, I'm just starting to hear some things about the EIS process itself and the public forums that we're going to have. And what I heard yesterday, and haven't confirmed it, is that there will actually be no real public comment, public vocalized comment at those hearings. You'll be able to write comments, and the FRA people will take those written comments away, but it's not going to be an open dialogue back and forth between different people. So hopefully we'll get more information on exactly what that community public forum will consist of, and I hope we can get that within the next 3 weeks. And that is that item, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, just in Commissioner Flory, I kind of concur with you that we could go ahead and thank them for increasing the public forums from 6 to 8, but I would totally disagree that we thank them for their kindness to extend to 75 days. To me, one is, I don't think the 15 days can impact their plan at all. I mean, this EIS has been delayed month after month after month, and it's hard to think that 15 days will really affect their long-term plan. I think by us saying, oh, gee, what a wonderful thing, we're kind of putting them in a position of strength in this negotiation. And given the fact that every community has asked for 90 days, for them to come back and just say 75 is, to me, how I view it is they're taking the stance, okay, we're going to fight you every single step of the way. We're not going to concede anything, even a lousy 15 days. And so I think this should put us on notice that this is going to be a long, hard battle, and we shouldn't be thanking them for anything like that. And then finally, to me, it brings up a serious question of who's in charge. We've been told all along that it's the FRA that has the authority to extend the commenting period. But all of a sudden, all aboard Florida says, well, okay, we'll do 75 days, and it's like a given. So my question is, who's in charge of that EIS? Is it all aboard Florida or the FRA? And so I'm not happy at all. I don't want to take the point that we're happy to get 75 days. I think we should very strongly say, no, we want and we need the full 90 days, and we draw that line in the sand.
For me, the only difference is I'm willing to thank all aboard Florida, but then go to the FRA and say, you didn't do the right thing. And I do think it's a very important message, because I think that this is an indicator that ideologically FRA is set in one direction, and it's not for the people in the Treasure Coast. And the fact that they reacted this way to all aboard Florida, I agree with you to the extent it's a great message to us that it's not a level playing field, that the FRA is already moving in one direction in anticipation of what they're going to find out in the future prior to actually even getting the information. So it doesn't disturb me that as much. The fact that all aboard Florida only agreed to or asked for 75 days doesn't disturb disturb me anywhere near as much of the fact that the FRA totally ignored the multiple, many hundreds of voices in the Treasure Coast and listened to just the one signal corporate voice of All Aboard Florida and FECI. And that to me is the much greater, more disturbing thing. So I just assumed for myself, try to keep a good working relationship with the people from All Aboard Florida and at least acknowledge that they did do something positive, but let everybody here know that the fight is, I agree with you, it's going to be very, very difficult, especially since it's apparent that some of the bureaucracies that we're going to be dealing with are biased against, I think we perceive as our interests. So I mean, there's just a little difference there, and I'm not even, really disagreeing with you. It's just a little different focus.
Bob, twice he said he agrees with us. That ties my record from last week.
What I'm thinking, he keeps it up, I'm going to remind him it takes a unanimous vote to add an emergency item.
Commissioner Floyd, I have no problem with you Friday asking the council to reiterate the request for 90 days. I don't know if we need a formal vote or just consensus would be fine. But,
Consensus.
Okay, so it sounds like we have consensus to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Solari.
Second item added by Commissioner Solari is the high cost of an unregulated monopoly. Commissioner Solari.
And that high cost of an unregulated monopoly in Indian River County right now is roughly $23 million a year, just so we put a number on it. But as many of us know by now, there was a proviso put in the Florida State budget this past year for $200,000 for an audit of an entity in a given statute, and it turns out that entity is FMPA, the Florida Municipal Power Agency, which many people perceive today as the barrier to the sale of the City of Vero Beach electric system to FP&L. And I think that proviso is a very good thing, and I would suggest, though, that we ask the chairman to write 2 letters as soon as it's practical, one to the governor and one to the auditor general. And both should, among other things, clearly ask that the FMPA's true economic value and member equity be addressed. If basically FMPA gets an audit each year, but their equity shows up each year based on the GASB principles as 0. So regardless of how they perform on a year-to-year basis, they still have an equity of 0, and that doesn't tell any member cities or their customers what they have, if they have something positive or negative. And so I think that we need to make a number of suggestions on what needs to be included in the audit and do that sooner rather than later. And in the chairman's letter, he may also suggest that the governor, a paragraph on why we feel this is necessary, and ask the governor to make sure that he leaves it in the budget. So I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Zork. Just under discussion and kind of clarify this a little bit, I think last week Commissioner Zork had wanted to bring this forward, and at the time I'd asked him not to because there's a little confusion as to whether it had been awareness enough of FMPA that they had none that had been put into the budget. So Commissioner Zork, apparently it had been out there, so I just did want to acknowledge that you had referenced that and that we were. I guess one of the things, with the Sunshine Law, we can't talk about stuff until.
And I'd like to note that the FMPA's local photographers blog did note that proviso was in there.
Yes, right. So it's out in the open, and I do concur, Commissioner Solari. I'll be glad to write that letter, and I do think we should emphasize, the first step is to make sure he does not veto that line item. And if any commissioner or anybody has an opportunity to speak to the governor, I think that's the message we need to convey, is to try to make sure that doesn't get vetoed.
We need to get hold of Bob Stewart.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, actually there's an event in the next few days with the governor here in Vero Beach that there'll be a number of people who would like to have a copy of that to hand deliver as well. And I think timing-wise, if we could maybe 2 days, if that's enough time to get this prepared and out in the mail, I know as soon as something can get out. Well, yeah, Dylan can write really fast.
And Dylan, if you would get with Jason and Commissioner Solari and Joe, I guess, and just make sure that we get the specific wording for the request down,
And maybe Glenn Herron, too.
Give Dylan ready to go.
That'll be fine.
And Mr. Chair, I'd also like to share that when I decided to, kind of on my own undertaking, to go up to Tallahassee on the last 2 days of session, I just, from a distance, and also speaking with our lobbyist, Joe McCann, that I think as the clock struck 8:51 on Friday night, when the budget kind of became not any more changeable after that, that the FMPA folks didn't know at that time. I think a day or two later they know, and I will be attending the auditor and the finance committee meeting this Thursday at FMPA as a guest of Pilar Turner at 8:30 Thursday morning in Orlando, and just curious to hear what their comments are looking forward to. This is also a short time frame audit. This is to be completed by the end of December, and in government terms of getting something done, that's pretty quick. So I think this provision that we're adding in here is what they ultimately own is very important, because if not, they come back with a zero book value, and it means nobody has anything. So.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to ask them to ask the Auditor General to mark the assets to market.
Right.
So that we can really get...
That's actually very important.
Yes, to me that is the key thing. There are a number of other things to ask for the audit, but that is the key. And I think that's a very reasonable request, because I believe that if the municipalities aren't as interested as they should be in this, the customers have a right to know. Because based on some analysis, and you can only say some analysis because all the information is not out there because the FMPA isn't too forthcoming with all of it, some analysis suggests that they are very deeply underwater, that they have a very significant negative net worth. And that really is an obligation for every participating municipality, and then on the backs of the customers. So I think that people have a right to know, and it's really ought to be the FUMPA's obligation to tell them what that is.
I don't mean to get bogged down in it, but right now I think we go ahead and do what you're talking about. We really need to focus on trying to get the governor to sign it. All of us worrying about all this kind of stuff.
He doesn't have to sign it. He has to not strike it.
Not veto it, or okay. Either way.
We have to give a governor a reason and explanation.
So what I'd like to see do also, if we could, commissioners, is I'm not sure where we sit with our lobbyists right now that we've hired for this. Now that we've got it in the legislation, we ought to get a hold of the lobbyists to have them on their side.
The lobbyists got it
actively working.
The
Is he working, the governor?
Yes. The lobbyists got it in the legislation, and he's working.
I'm just making sure.
Yep.
Okay, I hadn't heard that discussion here yet.
Right.
And just, it's kind of a side note, but if you are talking to the governor about this, also encourage him to fully fund the beach allocation, which keeps our Sector 3 reimbursement in the running there. So those are our two, I think, key things and talking points. All right, so motion by Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Zork. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a prior commitment down in Fort Pierce for another meeting to skip out on the last presentation.
I believe the last presentation will just be an update.
Will be minimal.
So we'll.
Okay, thank you, sir.
We'll give you an excused absence, Commissioner. That moves us to special districts and boards. The Solid Waste Disposal District minutes of the April 8th meeting. Second. Motion by Commissioner Flesher. Second by Commissioner Solari. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes by a 4-0 vote with Commissioner Zork absent. Next is a 2004 Master Plan update, summary of technical memorandums 1 through 3, and this will be presented by Mr. Burke. Good morning. Welcome, Vinny.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Commissioners. Usually people get up and leave after the presentation, but not before. This is a rare thing with Commissioner's work.
That'll really hurt your feelings, doesn't it? It might be
pretty. 5 ain't bad, so we'll see what happens. I want to thank the Commissioners for allowing me the opportunity to go through this master plan update for the residents at home watching from their TV or the computer, and for those still left in the audience with bated breath to hear about the master plan update. Here we are to present some information. This, again, is not for any kind of decision at this point. It's just an informational presentation. What we did not want to do was to inundate the board with voluminous amounts of information. I think we have about 60 megabytes of electronic information that's still in draft form. What we tried to do with staff and with our consultants, Neil Schaefer, is to distill that information into the salient points, and we can talk about those today. Just kind of go through an overview and then answer any questions you have. So there's 3 technical memos that we're going to get into a little bit here. Technical memo 1 was the background data and descriptions. Technical memo 2 covers the solid waste projections, the landfill capacity, and some future capacity needs. Technical memorandum 2B covers the cost of service analysis. And finally, technical memorandum 3 covers the customer convenience centers. So graphically, I'd like to throw this up here as a road ahead, just with the dark clouds off to the left, but we're heading up to the sunshine in full transparency. So if you can get past the metaphor, bear with me, we'll go through about 15 slides.
That could be the tough part.
Okay. Again, my name is on the top here, but I want to take time to thank our consultants, Neil Schaefer, both Stan Keeley and Ron Belady. Stan is in the audience today. If there's any additional questions that I can answer, Stan is here at the ready. C2HM Hill, Dave Green did some of the financial analysis that if you're a CPA, would love to be able to crunch some numbers, and he gave us a good roadmap in looking at some of the costs. We have other folks that subcontracted with Neil Schaefer, Kessler Consulting. They'll be doing some updates at some future time. And both here at Indian River County with the budget office with Jason and his staff and Kristen, as well as Himanshi Mehta and working with finance to provide some of the background information to the consultants for the analysis. So it's definitely a team effort here. So on December 3rd, 2013, the board authorized Neil Schaefer, our consultant, to update the solid waste master plan, work order number 1, for a total cost of $148,202. Today we're going to talk about the first 4 items. There are actually 3 technical memos. The existing system, again, the projections for number 2A, the cost of service analysis in 2B, and then the customer convenience centers. If you look at the last 3 technical memos, 4, 5, and 6, those will be presented to the board at some future time. And then we're going to condense all that information and bring that with all the technical memos, not in their draft form, but in a full presentation to the board sometime in the summer, perhaps in July. Technical memo 1. The SWID has incorporated a number of the recommendation in the 2007 plan. The last time we did the master plan update, there were some major improvements to the CCCs, or Customer Citizens Convenience Centers. All the SWID facilities are currently permitted and in compliance. It's noted that the solid waste quantities were reduced by the recession of 2000 and 2008, and we'll see some of that graphically a little bit later on. The INEOS agreement has had major implications regarding the handling of the solid waste, and right now, as you know, they take all of the vegetative material that would normally have gone for mulching or processing on site at the landfill, but is now being diverted for ethanol production. We have a new sludge processing facility, WAN Utilities, on the water and wastewater side to dewater some of the sludge that's located at the SWID site. Formerly, it was up at the central plant. And the former C&D landfill on the SWID site has been closed, and such waste now goes into the Class 1 landfill. The solid waste recycling and collection system remains unchanged from 2007, but it should be noted that the board has chosen to go out for an RFA for the current franchise hauling agreements that expire in 2015. So if you may recall that we hired Kessler Consulting, KCI, to help us create that plan, to reach out to stakeholders, to get input from the community to see what they're looking for the franchise agreements when they expire in 2015. And lastly, most notably, is the legislature has increased the solid waste recycling goal to 75% by the year 2020. We have an interim goal of 50% by the year 2015.
We're going to get there?
Depends on what we do.
We're not going to get there.
No.
I mean, we're just not going to. I mean, if we look at our performance for the last 4 or 5 years, and we look at the time that the new agreement might go into effect, I think we just need to face that now.
There's certain things that we can do now.
Denny, I'm sorry. One thing before we go further, I think we need to go back, because my understanding is when we looked at the construction demolition stuff, trying to recycle that, basically we found that before the containers even got to us, just the dumpster divers, the people going through, were taking out everything of recyclable value. They were grabbing the copper, the wood, anything they could get their hands on. And so what's left is the stuff that has no value, is unrecyclable, and that's counting against us at 100%, because that every pound that comes in, we can't pull anything out of that. And I don't know how we, correct that, but somehow there's got to be a factoring in that we're achieving 100% recyclable, because everything coming in is the worthless stuff that's left. So somehow I think we need to factor in the fact that it's getting recycled, just as being done before it gets into our hands. So
You call it the dumpster diving effect?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
That's my understanding, that when these guys show up for work, everything they threw in there yesterday is all gone. I mean, and I have people coming through my neighborhood. If I've got some aluminum, I just put it out by the garbage can when I take the garbage out, and before the garbage guy gets there, that aluminum's gone.
I've got a preferred recycler, but he doesn't go to the landfill. I mean, I call him up. I don't have to lift it. He takes it. And he goes down, and he's happy to do it.
Somehow, I mean, I think we're doing it. It's just not reflected what ends up at the landfill, because it's already been filtered through.
So can we just take the volume that, like Mr. Scrap and all these other, I mean, that's where they take it.
Right.
For the most part, they don't take it down.
We do, and they should be required to report to the state the amount of material that they're getting in. Now, I don't know if it all comes in from Indian River County, if it comes in from other parts of the county, and that's something that we need to do some research on, because I know there's a couple of scrap yards in Fort Pierce, and if they offer different prices for the commodity, you might have material that comes from Indian River County because somebody lives in the south part of the county. But you're absolutely right. We have to then quantify that material to count towards our ultimate goal, to reach the 50% in the interim. But also, some of the material for the concrete, obviously, there's not an economics for the Wally to be able to be in business, but that's something that right now is going towards our landfill and eating up the usable space as far as some of the cubic yards that are added on a yearly basis.
We need to get credit for that.
There are other areas, too. For instance, your Publix and your Walmart, which take the cardboard and ship themselves. We've got to get a system to get all those major cardboard users. And then little things like people who compost. Like I compost. One of the big things that the composition study showed was that there's a lot of food waste that goes in the landfill. But if you compost, all that stays at the house.
I don't waste it.
Well, you don't waste it, and I don't waste it.
He eats it.
But the point is, we're not getting credit for it. So maybe we have to go back a few years and look what the pounds per individual generated was, and make an argument that is what the baseline ought to be. The pounds per person 15 years ago, before recycling started, and then compare it to where we are now and say that X amount is due to these things.
Yep.
And then, Vinny, before you leave this slide, under A there, the improvements to the convenience centers, I went down to the Oslo Center again weekend ago, and I had 4 different things. I had yard brush, waste oil, electronic, and scrap metal, and just be able to pull up in there, and this goes here, this goes here, this goes here, that goes there. That thing flows so nice. I really like the design of the one down there in Oslo. And it's just, to me, it's working great. So anyway.
Okay. All right. We'll let some of our consultants know that.
And,
yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Vinny, we did talk about an element of reclamation at the site, and I understand that you said that would be somewhat problematic.
Yes. I mean, we did reach out to Republic. They're a contractor at the landfill at the open face. They cited some safety concerns and some DEP regulations that would not allow them to then pull out some material that has been added to the working face of the landfill in an effort to try to secure additional recycling and keep it from going into the landfill.
Just the obvious ones, the
old rear projector
100-pound TVs that are just being dropped into the landfill. I believe that there's got to be a way that we can reclaim those, and that would be a significant percentage. In addition, a recommendation to the school board, perhaps maybe they want to reconsider the color of the styrofoam plates that they're throwing out. There's thousands of food trays being thrown out, and we cannot convert them into a product, or at least go through the toothpasting process, as you call it, because of the color of the plate. And if they were white plates or beige plates, we would be able to do that, as you stated. And I think that we should be able to pick up a few percents right there. There's thousands of them going into the dumpster every day.
And to Commissioner Solari's point, we are bringing back the results of the waste composition study June 3rd, so stay tuned for that information, because that's kind of telling as to what is or is not going into the landfill. So here's some of the tonnages from 2006 to 2013. The large bar here in the maroon color as the total solid waste that's added to the landfill. And if you look at 2006, 2007, you can see that it's quite a large volume that's being added, whereas more in line with what we're doing now is about 252,000 or so, 254,000 cubic yards. The blue is the recycled tonnage. Again, it would be nice to be up around here for the blue screen, closer to 75%, but right now our facts and figures has us at about 38% of the recycled material that we've been able to.
And Vinny, on the total solid waste, another thing if you can add to it, it would be total tonnage on a per capita basis.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, the population line would be increasing over that period of time. And if our tonnage is going down, I think that's a further reflection of, might be some reduced use because of the recession, but still I think reflects that a lot of the stuff is being recycled out as we just discussed. So.
And that's the hope, is while the population increases slightly, we can then correlate the increase of the recycling with the decrease in the amount being added to the solid waste landfill. Okay, we'll make note of that. Solid waste generation projections were developed using capacitor generation rates. For the next 25 years, the calculated volume of solid waste generated would be 5.4 million cubic yards of Class 1 waste and about 1.8 million cubic yards of C&D. Now, I have to do say that this figure does not take into account if we had reached the hypothetical set 50% or even the 75%. It was based upon if we did nothing now using those projections looking out to 2063. So it's a baseline to say, okay, based upon the population with the slight increases in the amount of material that's been added to the landfill, this is the amount of space that we're going to need or we're going to require for the solid waste that will be generated in the next 25 years. This is a map that Neil Schaefer put together of the landfill. On the right-hand side here, you'll see the existing Class 1 disposal area. The future is in the light green. The orange is the existing C&D disposal area, and then you have the blue stormwater or perimeter ditches. So at the top of the screen is Oslo. This is 95, the diagonal on the left-hand part of the screen, and 74th. The main entrance to the landfill is where my cursor is. The large part of the landfill is in the process of being filled, and hopefully we will be capping that off probably in 2015. Cell 1 has been constructed. Selective waste has been added to that, and we are now working that actively. And you can see cells 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 here as future space for solid waste. The C&D landfill was accepting clean material at this point, but some of that material again is being added to the landfill. Technical Memo 2B is the cost of service analysis, where Commissioner Sorrow probably crunch on some of the numbers. The consultant CH2M Hill that was working with Neil Schaefer helped develop a discrete financial model. Kristen was part of a conference call that we had to look at how that model is set up and hopefully can be used for the future analysis and projection by SWID staff. It must be noted that the reorganization that has occurred to simplify operations in terms of going to contracted services has helped to reduce some of the overall operating costs, even though there have been some cost increases that the county has incurred. So by the mixture of increased efficiency, the overall operating costs have declined from $11.4 million to about $10.4 million, about 1.7 decrease annually. Contract with Republic does not clearly delineate what it costs at each of our customer convenience centers, so it makes it difficult to analyze the total cost impacts and the possible changes to any CCC operations. So here's a draft of the revenue fluctuations looking at fiscal year 2007 on the left-hand side, all the way out to fiscal year 2013. We highlighted some of the figures because I think they're quite telling. In this case, the numbers do tell a story. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see the total revenues that were brought in, the total expenses. So in fiscal year 2007-8, it was a pretty good year. You had interest income of nearly $1.7 million. You had some demolition charges, and you had some recycling sales that were quite healthy. So the net revenue in that year was in the positive $1.1 million. But then if you look at the last 4 years, you'll see that going from left to right, we ran a negative balance. Negative $1.2 million, negative $400,000, negative $800,000, and most recently, negative $320,000. In other words, we're not covering our costs. We're pulling in some revenue from the assessments that are charged to single-family, multifamily, and commercial, but our costs are larger than what we're able to bring in. So what I was able to do is to try to pull some numbers together looking at the residential and the commercial rates and match up how the rates were reflected and how we did. So in other words, in fiscal year 2007-8, in the bottom of the screen you'll see that the residential rate was about $44.04. And because of the healthy balance, it was then decided to do a decrease the next year of $40.94, a reduction to the assessments for savings. And you can see where that number flatlined for a few years. And then you can see where the assessments had to be increased to try to cover some of the deficits that we had been running. And most recently, it was brought up to $44.29, again, for single family. Thanks to budget, we were able to graphically show those. And what you have is the numbers looking at the commercial rates and the residential rates, and then graphically depicting the drop in each of those. So commercially, we've had an over 16% drop since 1997. So if you're a commercial property owner that's being assessed, you're paying 16.5% less now than you were in 1997.
And that's not a millage rate. That's
the assessed rate. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's not adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
That's non-adjusted for inflation.
Right.
And then comparatively over 11.5% for the residential ERU rate history. You can see the slight upticks from 2009 to 2010 on the right-hand part of the screen where we had to increase our...
No, Benny, I want to make sure that everybody's clear, or at least that I'm clear in my mind, that is not, when I say it's a millage rate or anything like that, that is not based on the value of the property going
correct.
down. That is an actual dollar value decrease.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a non-ad valorem tax that's assessed for the solid waste, covering the cost of the landfill.
Tax revenue go down like that. Millage rate stays the same. It's been a function of property values going down, not really necessarily us sharpening our pencil like we have. Okay.
That's a good point. Here's a map that you're probably all familiar with showing the location of the customer convenience centers in the north part of the county up to Roseland, Fellsmere, Winter Beach off of 65th Avenue, Gifford shown. I'm sorry, 65th Street. Better eyesight than me. Gifford off of 41st Street, and Oslo Customer Convenience Center, Chairman O'Brien had mentioned as well. That was recently renovated. We have our landfill operation off of 74th, and right next to that is the INEOS, New Planet Bioenergy Center. The blue bins are where customers can pick up some of the blue bins for recycling. Technical Memorandum number 3 as the Customer Convenience Center improvements. The county has significantly upgraded the Fellsmere and the Oslo CCCs as per the former 2007 Master Plan update. The Fellsmere Center was completely rebuilt and enlarged in 2008-2009 at a cost of $2.1 million. Most recently, the Oslo CCC was upgraded with roll-off containers and compactors, better traffic flow, and a new staff center. That was a cost of $2.5 million, completed in the fall of 2013. The remaining unimproved facilities continue to degrade, and so in our capital plan, we've budgeted for improvements not only to Gifford at approximately $2.5 million, but to Roseland and to Winter Beach as well. Even though we recently spent some money last fiscal year to do some paving over at Gifford due to some of the potholes. C is interesting, and it must be noted that the customer convenience centers handle about 10% of the total waste generated, but yet consume about 30% of the budget. So we did some graphs here, at least the last couple fiscal years, to show, again, the garbage is in the maroon, the recycling totals are in blue, the yard trash is in green, and it's very hard to see the yellow that's in for the tires. Looking at the Oslo, Gifford, Roseland, Fellsmere, and Winter Beach areas. You can see that Oslo is probably the busiest customer convenience center, with Winter Beach being the least used. This is numerically some of the tonnages. I bring you to this number here, which is just shy of 25,000 tons, and refer you back to the original graph that we had showed you, showing that the green represents, again, about 10% of the total material that's added to the landfill. And some additional notes based upon changes to the collection recycling system to be discussed in future technical memos. Utilization of the CCCs may be impacted. If the CCCs continue to current operation, it was recommended to look at upgrading the Gifford CCC and shutting down the Winter Beach CCC. Not necessarily that we would do those things, but that's stuff that we have to look at as part of our operational issues. And the landfill MRF, which currently holds material for the dual stream, is in need of upgrading, not only for the ease of use, but some of the safety and some of the capacity constraints that are there. And the HHW is just an acronym for hazardous household waste. And so those areas need to be looked at, and we need to do some research on how we can best improve those, not only for the haulers that bring the material in, but for the employees that are working the material that then gets transferred. So again, June 3rd, we're coming back with the waste composition study, which I think will be eye-opening, that looked at the geographic representation, the material coming in Indian River County, Fellsmere, City of Vero Beach, and Town of Warwick and Indian River Shores, as well as the future of recycling and some of the issues that are at bay and how we can address not only achieving the interim goals, but possibly trying to get to the 75% by the year 2020. And that concludes my presentation. So if there's any additional questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those questions.
I think we have to realistically look at Winter Beach, because our costs and convenience center are so high. We may have to. It's bringing in so little waste, and it's got such a high cost. Closing that one and diverting to the others. And there's Giffords nearby.
Instead of everything's on the table, and I understand that. I think really what we need to be careful of, though, is I look at where I think growth is going to come from. It is that center part of the county. It's basically the urban service boundary between 58 or between State Road 60 and 510. You've got all of DeVosta. You've got the Providence Point. You've got the Antilles is coming back. You've got just the Huntington Place is coming back online. And it'd be interesting to note the populations. Potential for population around that specific area, because clearly it makes sense why Roseland does what it does, Fellsmere does what it does, because they're just but Oslo's clear. You've got one that covers a very large area. Not to say it's not, but I really don't think that for us to base a decision on closing something down based on the past 5 years, whenever you look at that, very well maybe where the next population circle's fixing to come from. We wish we might not have done that so fast.
Take a look at that.
And just, I understand the folks that have become accustomed to going to the convenience centers, and for some of them it's
social event.
It's their social event, and I get that 100%. But Dylan, going forward, and Commissioner Davis had a good point, the future growth, but would you legally be able to say, okay, a new subdivision coming in that curbside pickup would be mandatory, and that those new homes coming in would have a non-ad valorem assessment for trash pickup, and these wouldn't be people used to going to their social event. It would be new people coming in, and that'd be one way to start easing out of the convenience centers.
Probably the best way to do that would not be for the county to get involved, but it's through community development. It's part of the deed restrictions of a community.
Either way, I'm just thinking a new subdivision coming in from the very get-go. Yeah. Curbside pickup is mandatory, and somehow it's got to work one way or the other.
There are a couple of other things that we're really going to have to wait till we get more of this information. But what is the impact of hitting 75% recycling? That will change everything in ways we probably haven't thought of yet. Yeah. There's the idea of going from dual stream to single stream in order to make that goal, which would make putting things in the recycle bin probably a lot easier for a lot of people, and that would change things. And then I'll just toss up the idea of, if we're really trying to get 75% recycling, where the volume of trash in the old trash can goes down substantially, do we really want twice-a-week pickup? That type of thing. And then we have to just look at one way or the other, what's the impact of having the convenience centers on the total recycling goals? And I don't have the answers to that yet either, but for me personally, I want us to make sure that we're on a path to meet the 75% state goal, period. And so we have two, in my mind, again, variables that we need to consider most. One is the 75% goal, and the other is the costs, total costs of the systems. Now I'm going to have Commissioner Davis choke before he goes to lunch. Because, one of the things, again, to consider, and I'm not saying how I feel on this is, do we have mandatory pickup within the urban service area? So
be more palatable for me.
Well, no, because I think there are reasons for not having it outside the urban service area. I mean, the urban service area is almost by definition an area where you'd have urban services, and understand the joys of going to the convenience centers. But again, what is the path which gets us to the cheapest cost for all the customers who are doing the right thing, and to make the 75% recycling goal? I mean, I don't have the answers yet, but I think that we've got to get, by July, August, we have to get clarity on what that path is.
And I think it's good to throw these ideas out now.
But I want to. I think
so that we can
need
all
to have people, the citizens thinking about these things.
Right.
I'd rather have the guy send me the ugly email now about making them get mandatory pickup than 100 of them right before we have to make a decision.
And Commissioner, I probably a lot of, because I switched it to curbside pickup just because, for me personally, to make 2 trips a week to the convenience center with my truck, and the amount of time I spent in line, waiting and this and that, for the $14 a month, when I broke it down, how much gas it cost me and time, it was a no-brainer. I mean, quite frankly, but
and for me, probably my favorite service with the city of Vero Beach is trash pickup.
Right.
I mean, we also have like 6 buckets, or 4 or 5, 6 buckets of yard trash a week, and the burden of that and the recycling and the regular trash I'm happy to pay my 14.
And I think the biggest pushback will come on if you propose going from twice a week garbage to once a week. I agree with you. As my family has shrunk, as the kids have moved off, and the recycling has picked up, I could get by with once a week garbage. I don't have a problem. I think maybe a younger family would still need twice a week pickup, and then I think a lot of the seniors might object just because of the smell or storage or whatever. So I think that'd be the hardest thing to overcome. But
I'm almost one of those seniors, and I don't object too much.
Almost.
Well, your lovely wife puts up with a lot with you, so
has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I know. Ms. McKenzie, did you have a comment on the solid waste master plan?
I do have a comment on the recycling center that's located on 60-something. You're talking about possibly closing it down?
Winter Beach.
Right. Well, personally, I don't think people know it's there. And I know that from my personal experience because I was looking for a recycling center. I know where the Oslo one is. I know where the Gifford one is. That one, I had to drive around quite a bit to kind of find it and know it was there. And then when I found it, I was like, oh, I might as well go a route that I prefer or know on a regular basis, because the only time I go there is if I'm driving to Liberty Magnet or something like that. So that location is just not well known. I don't know if it would help to let the new developments like Waterway and Vero-Lago and that kind of pocket in there know about it, because I know when I promoted homes in that area, we didn't know about that service. And most people in that income bracket tend to favor recycling for storage reasons and whatever, and just knowing that the location is there would help. And I've had this discussion with Mr. Burke that sometimes even just having a small incentive would be nice, or some counties have like a 2 times a year pickup, and they send out, let's pick up your electronics for you, especially for seniors and people like that who can't necessarily tote these things to
the landfill.
Right. If you were to say, okay, every May Day or November, we'll have a countywide pickup of all your microwaves and toaster ovens that you no longer want, you might have a bigger participation as far as people actually going out. But I don't think you should close that station. I just think people don't know it's there, and it's quite challenging to find if you never ever have a reason to go down. What road is it?
65th or South Winter Beach Road.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how many people use it unless they are deliberately going to the fairgrounds. So I don't know. I don't think it's signage. I just think people just don't know it's there. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sir, do you have anything? Or
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephen Zurich, 945 37th Avenue, Vero Beach. Just one question on a small point, but an important one, I think. The talk about dumpster diving. Now, I have been to the Oslo used to be a transfer point, now it's a convenience center. Over the years, from when it was the old thing going up the hill, today it's a vast improvement, and I thank you for that. But the thing about dumpster diving, scavenging, to my knowledge, is supposed to be prohibited. Now, aside from safety and health issues, effectively, if I understand right, scavenging is stealing from the county because the county is going to be losing credits and possibly funds from items taken out. Now, isn't this scavenging prohibition prohibited?
Or? Yeah, you're correct. I was referring to like at a construction site when someone's building a home and they have a container out front that the workers throw all that's where the dumpster diving's going. Right. It's not happening in the convenience centers. It is prohibited there.
It may happen at the convenience centers, but because of that, they've taken some of the recyclables and put them up to where they can keep a better eye on them. Right. But the dumpster diving is on the job site, where they may take some leftover sheet metal from the air conditioning ductwork of some kind, and then you have people that are going there after they get off work that day. They'll go there and see what all somebody threw away that's going to be thrown away, that in all candor probably will go directly into just the regular this construction demolition debris section, not even go through the recycling process because, well, nobody's going to separate that out. It just gets dumped and rolled off on the hill.
It generally happens right after the wiring goes in.
Yeah. Yeah, just a little bit of copper and metal.
It is with the individual job site and not at the convenience.
So they're not stealing from us, I would say.
Yeah, you're correct there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Could you put that? I was looking at the maroon, the blue, the green, the yellow slide.
For the total tonnage or just the customer convenience
Well, you
centers?
had a chart, yeah. And you were saying something about the blue, how that impacted us.
Well, this chart was just for the customer convenience centers for the tonnages that were received in comparison to the recycling material and the yard trash. There's another chart that also shows the total tonnages here. This is all the tonnages that go into the landfill. That shows the delineation between the solid waste, the total solid waste that is broken out between the recycled tonnages and the material that comes from the customer convenience centers.
Okay. I was just trying to get some clarity. And then that's good. I also wanted to find out about the trash pickup. Is that for you said something about the urban areas. Is that part of our, when we get that, what we pay, I think it's like $88 on our property tax? Is that?
You're talking about the MSBU?
Yes. No. Are we entitled to trash pickup, or is that just certain areas?
No. There's no entitlement here. No. No entitlement there.
There's no entitlement of trash pickup?
It does include recycle pickup, though.
Yes.
Yeah. The recycle is for free, or we pay for it on our...
You paid for it, so if residents will get their blue recycle bins and put them out on the appropriate day, that will get picked up.
So we pay for that, and then the county get credit for our recycle items?
No, actually it's deducted from the amount you get charged for that part of it. So whenever you see somebody pulling aluminum cans out of a blue bin that you put out in front of your house, that's the point that Mr. Zurich was talking about when that's actually coming out of the taxpayers' pockets then.
So it keeps that amount higher. So if I get a lot of people in Gifford, I says, okay, put all your aluminum, put this here, and when we get our property tax at the end of the year, it'll be reduced?
You're close. It won't be your property tax. It'll actually be your solid waste disposal district fees.
Okay, and that'll reduce?
The more that we can recycle and we can sell, the less we have to charge to be able to at the dump.
Okay. All right.
And just please don't go on to everybody that their fees are going to go down. As you can see here, the last 3 years, the solid waste disposal district has been losing money. So increasing the recyclables that we could then sell might offset those losses, may not necessarily reflect in a reduction in the rate.
If I may, Mr.
Okay, just so we don't run around saying, okay, your rates go down if you put the aluminum cans out, because we're still dealing with a deficit, okay?
Okay.
I mean, another thing, if we're going to keep things costs down, it's important to realize that we're all going to have to participate more actively in this recycling if we're going to meet this state goal of 75%. If I did my math right, and if I remember the numbers correctly, with dual stream recycling, which we have now, it costs $58 a ton to process that. But if we move to single stream, in order to increase recycling significantly, it's $79 a ton. And again, this is the hard part if I did my math right, we'll have to increase recycling by 62% to break even. But we also have to make that state goal of 75%. Or we'll get some penalties, and who knows what penalties the state will come up. I mean,
Probably make us pay back FEMA dollars.
It may be something like that, or maybe they won't give them back to us back in 2020.
We'll really send it all.
Is that a promise? Is that a promise?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's very good. And I just wanted to make a point with the Gifford Economic Development Council, because there's not a lot of jobs for our people in our community. I do want to make you aware, because there was a joke about the dumpster divers. A lot of people do supplement their living dumpster diving. And, you know, it's not a whole lot of money, but it's better than starving. So one of the things that we want to do in our organization is to increase more jobs, so less people are, you know, dumpster diving, but they're actually making wages and contributing more towards the, you know, paying taxes or the tax base.
And Ron, please, I didn't use that term in a disparaging or derogatory
it's
manner.
It's real.
Oh, it is, and I just brought it up because we have to balance where our recycling goals is. But yeah, I'll admit, down in Plantation, my family, their favorite day of the week is when it's bulk pickup day, and they drive all over getting dressers and chairs and tables and
having a garage sale on the weekend.
And then they have a garage sale, yeah. So I did not mean it in a derogatory manner whatsoever.
It's real.
It is real, and it's just kind of the term that you do have a big dumpster, and they kind of jump in. So.
Oh no, I didn't take it because this is how people live. This is how they're supplementing their living.
100%.
Just to make ends meet. Well, not even make ends meet, just to not starve, because a lot of the residents are 200% to 300% below the federal poverty guidelines. I know you guys don't see that on the beach, but if you come to Gifford and you come to areas of Wabassa and Fellsmere, you'll see what I'm saying. I think Mr. Bird, we took a tour last summer, and he can attest to what I'm saying. So if we can get more jobs into the community, even more people working for solid waste, or then we could stop that, and then we can increase our numbers, our points, and then everybody wins. So we want to work together to help, you know, make this thing come true. Is it possible I could get a copy of that? It was a really good presentation.
You have this one?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Get with you after it's over.
Okay, Vinny, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, and we have some food for thought, and we'll look forward to the next update in June.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny.
Gentlemen, that concludes the agenda. I just would like to add that one of our firefighters was injured late last week in an explosion on a fireboat, and is being treated in Orlando for second, third degree burns. So I just would like to say a get well soon and best wishes to one of our folks. And with that, anything else? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.